The Alpha's Substitute Lover. A Werewolf Shifter Romance Audiobook. Written by Rain Hart. Chapter 1. The Man Who Didn't Wait. The bells of Silvervale Cathedral rang in high, radiant arcs, a song meant for joy. Their gilded notes climbed over the rooftops and dropped into Evelyn Vessaria's chest like tiny shards of glass. She stepped out of the carriage with a white box in her gloved hands, simple, elegant, wrapped with silver ribbon. Inside was a pendant she had commissioned, a small moonstone etched with Alden's initials. A gift for her soon-to-be husband. A charm. A promise. She smiled, small and precise, the kind of smile one offers when stepping into something sacred, and walked up the steps lined with roses. Her ivory coat fluttered behind her like a veil. No one was waiting at the door. That was the first sign. The second came when she opened the cathedral doors herself. It was full. Packed. The stone arches, the stained glass windows, the endless sea of finely dressed guests, everyone was in their place. The organ music climbed higher, a familiar hymn. The wedding march. She blinked. Why were they already playing the march? Her heels tapped softly on the marble as she moved further in. Something itched at the base of her spine, a wrongness so thick it felt like heat. And then, with the inevitability of dreams and nightmares, the crowd parted just enough for her to see. At the altar stood Alden, her betrothed, back straight, profile flawless as always. His golden hair gleamed under the rose-colored light of the stained glass. He was lifting a ring to place on Lillian's hand. Evelyn didn't move. The blood drained from her legs so fast her fingers went cold. The same Lillian who had just last week helped Evelyn select flower arrangements. The same sister who said she'd be away at a retreat in Donward Abbey. The same sister who now wore Evelyn's dress, no, not the exact one, but unmistakably inspired by it. Off-the-shoulder silk. Lavender pearls. The same neckline Evelyn had tried on 3 times before choosing. The box in her hands slipped. It didn't shatter. The lid just came off. The pendant rolled out and spun in a soft circle before coming to a stop near the edge of the aisle. No one moved to pick it up. No one moved at all. Only her mother stood, slowly walking toward her from the second row, expression unreadable behind her porcelain veil hat. "You're late, Evelyn," she whispered as she approached. "Please don't make a scene." "A scene?" Evelyn asked, voice hoarse. Her mother reached out and adjusted her coat collar, as if smoothing a wrinkle in a curtain. "He made his choice. And it's better this way, truly. Lillian is a better Vessaria?" Evelyn finished, but her voice was flat. "You'll understand in time." Her mother patted her shoulder once. "But right now I need you to leave. Quietly. Let them have this moment." She turned and walked away. The organist resumed playing. Evelyn did not remember leaving. One moment she was standing in the aisle, heart frozen inside her chest like a snowdrop in ice, and the next, she was alone on the estate's long driveway, bouquet still clenched in one hand like a dead thing. The sky had darkened, clouds low and churning. She walked. When the first drop of rain hit her cheek, she didn't flinch. She kept walking until she reached the service road beyond the estate gates, where the lights of the northbound shuttle glowed faintly in the mist. She bought a ticket without knowing the destination. The driver, a sleepy older man with soup stains on his collar, didn't ask questions. It was nearly midnight when the shuttle began climbing the forested ridges that bordered the edge of Mivale Province. The other passengers, 2 sleeping miners, a mother and child, and a man with a guitar case, dozed under flickering lights. The rain had turned to snow. Outside, the trees loomed, tall and silver-veined, like the bones of dead gods. She stared out the window. The engine groaned, then stopped. They were in the middle of the road, surrounded on both sides by walls of white and branches like claws. "Damn alternator's frozen," the driver muttered. "We'll need to wait." Evelyn opened the side door. "Miss, you really shouldn't." But she was already stepping out, boots crunching in soft snow. The cold bit her face. It felt good. Real. More real than the velvet cushions, the gold-lined invitations, the silence of a mother who had known and said nothing. The forest called. She walked. Branches whispered overhead. Ice glittered in the hollows like forgotten eyes. She walked until the shuttle's lights were swallowed by trees. Somewhere in the woods, something howled. She stopped. It was a long, low sound, part pain, part rage, and all impossible. The snow beneath her boots went still. Another howl. This time closer. She turned to look behind her. Nothing. Still, something inside her, something old and primal, screamed run. But she didn't. She took one step forward, deeper into the forest. The shadows shifted. A third howl, impossibly close. She turned again, just in time to see two glowing yellow eyes burst from the dark. She gasped. And then screamed. Chapter 2. The Black Wolf at the Border. The scream still echoed in her throat when Evelyn stumbled backward, feet slipping in the fresh snow. Her breath fogged the air in front of her face in frantic bursts, and her heart pounded against her ribs like it wanted out. The forest was alive with sound now, the shifting snap of underbrush, the thunderous crunch of something large on the move, the rhythmic panting of an animal that wasn't winded in the slightest. Then she saw it. Between two gnarled trees, a shape, black, impossibly large, sleek as shadow and twice as fast. The wolf stepped forward, its head low, ears pinned, and its glowing yellow eyes locked directly on her. She ran. The snow clung to her skirts and soaked through her boots. Branches scratched her face. Her lungs burned. But she didn't stop. Not even when her body screamed to fall. Not even when her vision blurred from exhaustion. Somewhere ahead, the woods opened into a clearing. She heard the soft lapping of water before she saw the glint of moonlight on frozen glass. An ice-covered lake. She skidded across the edge and fell, knee first, then elbow, the pain jarring and bright. The ice groaned beneath her, spiderweb cracks forming where her hand had landed. She turned just as the wolf pounced. But it didn't strike. It landed only feet away, muscles coiled, black fur bristling. Steam rose from its shoulders like smoke from a pyre. Its eyes bore into hers, hungry, glowing, terrifyingly aware. And yet it didn't move. Evelyn trembled. "Please," she whispered, throat raw. The wolf's ears twitched. It took a slow, prowling step toward her. She didn't move. It growled low in its throat. Then, something shifted. The animal whimpered. It staggered. And in the next breath, the wolf dropped to its side with a pained snarl and began to convulse. Fur melted into skin. Muscles snapped and realigned. She stared, too stunned to scream, as the beast shrank into a human shape. A man. He collapsed forward onto his hands, naked, breathless, bleeding from a deep gash across his left shoulder. Snow melted around his body in a steaming ring. His back rose and fell with every shaky breath. And he looked up at her. Not with fangs, not with yellow eyes, but with a face. A man's face. Beautiful in a sharp, arresting way. Harsh cheekbones. Dark hair matted with snow. And those same wild eyes, now dulled to a stormy gray. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Then he looked down at her leg. She followed his gaze and realized her shin was bleeding. A jagged branch had cut her when she fell. She hadn't even felt it. He reached forward. She recoiled, instinct taking over. But he didn't touch her. Instead, he lowered his head and pressed his lips to the wound. Evelyn gasped, unable to move, unable to speak. His mouth was warm against her cold skin, the contact electric and unnervingly tender. She should have been terrified. Should have screamed. But something about it, something primal, stilled her. His lips lingered. Then he pulled back, trembling. And collapsed. Blood from his shoulder seeped into the snow, dark and viscous. His breath slowed. His body shook with the effort to remain upright. "Wait," she managed, crawling to him on hands and knees. Don't Don't die. But his head dropped forward. He was unconscious. She looked around, heart hammering. The forest loomed, still and silent now. No more howls. No more growls. Just her alone in the night, beside a naked, bleeding man who had moments ago been a monster. And he had saved her. Why? It was the last thought she remembered clearly before the cold crept into her spine, and everything went black. Warmth came in waves. Softness. She blinked slowly, fighting the haze. A ceiling. Stone, high and arched. A fire crackling nearby. Blankets pressed around her, too many to be her own. The pillow beneath her cheek smelled of cedar and ash. She sat up slowly. The room was grand. And old. Curtains of deep blue hung from carved beams. A fireplace roared at the far end. A thick rug covered the stone floor, and glass-latticed windows let in a faint, silvery glow. She had never seen this place before. Her own boots and coat lay neatly folded on a chair near the hearth. Her bleeding leg had been wrapped with skill, clean linen, tight but not too tight. She wasn't alone. A man stood at the far end of the room, his back to her, buttoning a dark shirt. The muscles in his shoulders flexed as he moved, the gauze over his wound now stained a dull red. She swallowed. He turned. It was him. The wolf. No, no longer. Just a man. Barefoot, bruised, tall. His eyes were sharp, ancient in their stillness. He looked at her like he already knew everything. You're awake. Her voice caught. You. He didn't smile. Didn't approach. You shouldn't have come into this forest, he said, tone as smooth and cold as the snow outside. Evelyn stared at him. Her mouth opened. Closed. Finally, but you saved me. He tilted his head, almost imperceptibly. That wasn't me, he said softly. That was instinct. She blinked. Instinct? I smelled something, he said. Something I thought I'd never smell again. He took one step forward, and though he made no move to threaten her, Evelyn felt her heart hitch. What did you smell? She whispered. His eyes locked onto hers, unwavering. Her. Chapter 3: The Visitor with the Moon Needle. Evelyn stood before the arched window of her borrowed chamber, watching frost form veins across the glass. The forest outside had gone still, the trees sheathed in ice like bones. Somewhere below, the manor breathed, old, creaking, endless. She had not ventured beyond this room since waking, though time moved strangely here. Either a night had passed or an entire lifetime. The man, the one who'd saved her, transformed before her eyes, bled for her and vanished into clothes and silence, had not spoken much since that first exchange. He'd brought her food she couldn't eat, water she didn't sip, and always stood too far or far too close. His name was Serenic. He had said it once, curt and offhand, as though names meant little. Still, she clung to it. She touched the bandage on her leg. The pain was dull now, but real. It anchored her more than the velvet walls or gold-handled doors. And even more than the ache in her chest, she refused to name. There was a knock. Sharp, deliberate. She turned. No servants had come. No footsteps except his until now. The door opened before she answered. And in stepped a woman. Tall. Composed. Skin pale as candlelight. Her black hair was coiled into a crown of braids pinned with silver leaves. She wore a gown of muted blue velvet that shimmered like mist, and around her throat gleamed a heavy chain from which hung a moonstone the size of a plum. Her eyes were violet. Not soft. Not kind. But full of something Evelyn couldn't name. Pity, perhaps. Or hunger dressed as sympathy. Evelyn Vessaria, the woman said, voice cool and smooth as lacquer. You are awake. Good. Evelyn stiffened. Who are you? The woman did not smile. I am Evelyn Vessaria. You are in my brother's house. Evelyn blinked. I thought this belonged to Serenic. It does, Yold interrupted. He is my brother by blood, though less so in temperament. Her eyes moved over Evelyn like measuring tape. Then she walked slowly toward the center of the room. Evelyn stepped back. "You're his sister?" "I said I was his kin, not his ally." She stopped just a few feet away and extended her gloved hand. Evelyn didn't take it. Yold sighed as if disappointed. "No matter. I'm not here to trade pleasantries. There are procedures." "Procedures?" "To ensure your presence here is not a danger. To him. Or to you." Evelyn's heart thudded. "What do you mean danger?" "I mean you walked into an ancestral territory riddled with old enchantments and wild instinct, and you lived. That is not usual." "I didn't mean to. I was lost." "That is not the point." Yold drew something from her sleeve. Thin. Silver. It glinted under the firelight with a strange, bluish sheen. A needle. "I require your hand." Evelyn froze. "Why?" "We test all anomalies this way." "Anomalies?" Yold's lips twitched. "You'll forgive the term. But you see, this house, this family, has rules. All bonds are marked. All mates registered. It is how we survive. We are ruled by instinct, yes, but governed by design." "I don't understand," Evelyn said, breath catching. "Of course you don't. But you will. Now, your hand." Yold's gaze sharpened, and for a moment, Evelyn felt as if she stood before a predator in silks. "I don't. This doesn't make sense." The door behind them opened again. Serenik stepped inside, silent as shadow. His eyes flicked to the needle. His jaw tightened. "What are you doing?" he asked Yold, not a question so much as a quiet threat. She didn't flinch. "Your stray requires classification." "She's not a stray. She's not anything yet. I told you not to involve the old rites." Yold ignored him and turned back to Evelyn. "If you're as harmless as you appear, this won't hurt much." Evelyn wanted to refuse. Her body did not trust this woman, nor the cold glint in her eye. But something deeper, the same instinct that had kept her from screaming when a wolf turned into a man, kept her hand from pulling away. She extended it. Yold pricked her palm. It was sharp. Not unbearable, but startling. The silver bled into her skin like ink. Her veins lit up for an instant, then went dark. Yold frowned. Nothing happened. No glow. No shimmer. No response. Again, Yold murmured, twisting the needle. Evelyn gasped. "Stop." Still nothing. Yold dropped her hand. "How curious." Serenik moved forward, placing himself between them. "What does that mean?" Evelyn asked, cradling her hand. Yold's voice was as soft as silk and twice as cutting. "It means you are unmarked. No tether. No latent connection. No recognition." "I don't." "You do not carry a mate bond," Yold said, tilting her head. "Which is unusual, considering how he reacted when he found you." Evelyn looked between them. "What are you saying?" Yold smiled, but it was a brittle, empty thing. "I'm saying you don't belong here. At least not to him. Perhaps not to anyone." "I'm sorry," Evelyn said, shaking her head. "I didn't ask for any of this. I just—" "You bled into a forbidden forest. You were found by a Drellthorn. You were brought into his house. Whether you asked or not, you're in it now. That doesn't mean I'm wrong." Yold gave her a long, unreadable look. "No. It just means you're alone." And then she turned and walked out, leaving Evelyn with a stinging hand and a heart that had begun to pound all over again. She stumbled from the room. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away from that woman, from those words. She found herself in a corridor of cold stone, the walls hung with faded tapestries and portraits whose eyes followed her like ghosts. Her breath caught. Her legs refused to steady. Was she really just some null? No one? Nothing? She reached a tall door and pushed through, stumbling into a darkened parlor. And found him there. Serenik. He was seated on the windowsill, his body half-shadowed by the pale light. "You shouldn't have run," he said. "I'm not." "I didn't mean to." She stopped herself. Bit back a sob. She said, "I'm nothing." He turned his head. She said I have no bond. No mark. That I don't belong here. Silence. She took a step forward. Is it true? Serenik said nothing. And then, finally, he rose. Walked toward her. Each step deliberate. Measured. I don't care. Her breath hitched. What? I don't care if you're marked or not. That test means nothing to me. His eyes were fire and frost. The blood doesn't decide who stays. I do. He stepped closer. She said I'm not yours. I said, he growled, you stay because I want you here. Evelyn trembled. And then, for the first time, she smiled. A small, wounded thing. But real. I thought you'd throw me out. I'm not in the habit of discarding what I bled for. Her chest rose and fell. And in that moment, something in her shifted. The fear didn't vanish. The pain didn't dissolve. But it was no longer hers alone to carry. She was still trembling when he reached for her injured hand. He lifted it to his lips. Kissed the prick in her palm. She closed her eyes. She didn't feel nothing. She felt everything. Outside the room, in the long hall lit by a dying chandelier, Yold stood silently at the corner, watching the closed door. She spoke to no one in particular. You're making the same mistake, she murmured. A pause. Then, almost gently. Do you love her, Serenik, or are you just trying to bring her back? Chapter 4. The Man Who Chose Me Anyway. The snow had stopped sometime before dawn, leaving the world outside the manor hushed in silver. Evelyn sat alone in the corner of the greenhouse, wrapped in a shawl she'd found on the back of a carved chair, her fingers tracing the rim of a cold teacup. Around her, the air was warm and heavy with the scent of dying roses. Wilted vines clung to the glass ceiling like pale veins. Even in its grandeur, the space felt like something forgotten, an afterthought to beauty, suspended in grief. She hadn't spoken to Serenik since the test. Every time she heard his footsteps down the hall, she retreated, to this room, to the library, to the maze of stone corridors she barely remembered how to leave. Shame trailed her like a second shadow. Unmarked. Unbonded. A failure. She didn't blame Yold. She hated the woman, yes, but only because she'd said aloud what Evelyn feared was already true. She was nothing. No power stirred at her core. No thread of fate tugged toward another. She was, as Yold had coldly observed, alone. And yet, he hadn't sent her away. Why? The question circled in her head like smoke, always trailing heat and ache in its wake. The door to the greenhouse creaked open. She didn't turn. I know where you go to hide, Serenik said. His voice was low, as always. Even. Evelyn kept her eyes on the dying lavender near her knee. I'm not hiding. You're not speaking to me. That's different. Silence stretched between them. She expected him to sigh. Or leave. Instead, she heard his boots crunch against the gravel path of the greenhouse floor. A pause. Then he crouched beside her. I built something, he said. For you. She blinked. Slowly turned. You? What? In the library. Come see. I don't think. He stood. Come. She hesitated, her shame rising like a tide. Then, finally, she followed. He didn't touch her as he led her through the echoing corridors. Didn't look back. But something in his pace had changed, less soldier, more something else. A gentler presence. He brought her to the west wing of the manor. Past the locked archives and the chamber that always smelled of burnt sage. Past stone lions and old tapestries. To a door she hadn't noticed before. He opened it. The room beyond was warm, the air thick with candlelight and ink. Books lined the shelves from floor to ceiling. But it wasn't the books that caught her breath. It was the ceiling itself. Above them, set into the curved dome, was a celestial map. Star charts etched in silver thread, constellations carved directly into obsidian glass. And in the center, glowing faintly with lunar magic, was the moon as it had looked on the night she'd arrived. She couldn't finish. I had it charted, he said. Your arrival night. I tracked the stars. the storm, even the wind direction. She stared at the map, tears burning behind her eyes. Why? He stood beside her. Close, but not touching. Because you matter. She looked down. Her throat clenched. I don't have an imprint. I don't feel anything. I do. She turned to him, voice raw. You don't care that I'm broken? You're not broken. Then what am I? He paused. Then, gently. You're whole. You just don't know it yet. She closed her eyes. A tear slipped free. He stepped forward, his hand lifting, but he didn't touch her. Not until she leaned toward him, silent permission. His fingers brushed her cheek. You think fate is always right? He asked softly. Fate marks monsters, Evelyn. Marks abusers. Slavers. My own parents were bonded, and they tried to kill each other. But I don't want a bond, he said. I want a choice. She looked up at him. The grief inside her trembled, then shifted. Why me? I don't know. He smiled faintly. Maybe I like how you don't flinch when I look at you. I'm flinching right now. That's because you think I'm about to kiss you. She startled. He leaned forward, almost touching her forehead with his. His voice dropped lower. I'm not, he said. Unless you ask me to. Her breath caught. Why? Because if I do it without asking, and you want it, you'll blame yourself. And if I ask? He hesitated. Then I'll know it's real. She stared at him. And then, quietly, heartbreakingly, you're the first person who's ever said I could choose. He reached out, thumb brushing away the tear on her cheek. Even if you weren't anyone's mate, he murmured, you'd still be the one I picked. She looked up at him. Because I'm me? He didn't answer. Instead, he kissed her forehead, soft, reverent, and said nothing at all. From the shadowed hallway beyond, unseen and unspeaking, Yold turned away from the half-cracked door. Her lips were pursed, her eyes colder than moonlight. You poor, foolish man, she whispered. You still don't understand which one you loved. Chapter 5, The Shadow Watching. The manor slept as Evelyn slipped through the eastern gate. No one saw her. She had waited until the candlelight dimmed in the halls, until footsteps stilled and even the wolves in the forest gave up their nightly howls. And then, wrapped in a cloak that didn't belong to her and boots too large for her feet, she stepped into the snow. The air outside tasted of iron and pine. The cold stung, sharp and clarifying, like it wanted to peel her down to whatever truth lived beneath skin. She wasn't sure why she'd gone. Only that her chest had felt too tight inside the stone walls, the silence too loud in her room, and Serenik's absence too noticeable. He hadn't spoken to her since the star room. He had looked at her, yes, as if she were something real and chosen, but then he'd vanished into another day of not speaking, not touching, not quite belonging. She hated how she missed the attention, even when it frightened her. The forest began where the frost-bitten lawn ended. The fog clung low, bluish and thick, curling around her ankles like vines. She stepped into it, past a ring of dead birch, past the old statue of a forgotten saint with no head, past the crumbled stone wall where the boundary between wild and owned blurred like old ink. The snow wasn't deep, but it muffled her footsteps enough that the crunch of twigs startled her. And then she heard it. Breathing. Not hers. It came from behind a tree. Rough. Controlled. Not an animal. She froze. Hello, she called out. No answer. She took a step back. Then another. A low branch cracked under pressure, not from her. Her heartbeat pounded so loud it filled her ears. She turned and ran. The woods twisted fast. The mist shifted like curtains being pulled open. Shadows flicked in and out of view, too tall for animals, too fast for men. She didn't look back. Her foot caught a root, and she stumbled into a clearing, one she hadn't seen before. It opened like a breath in the middle of the dense forest, ringed with black stones and thick roots. At the far end stood a narrow building of dark stone, hidden behind ivy and half swallowed by trees. A tower. She didn't remember seeing it from the manor. But the door was ajar. She ran for it. The inside smelled of dust and burnt wax. The stairs creaked under her as she climbed. Her breath came fast and raw. Above her, the dim light of an old chandelier swung gently, casting shadows like claw marks across the walls. At the top, a door. She pushed it open. A library. Not like the one he'd shown her. This one was ancient. Cold. Books stacked unevenly, scrolls bursting from broken cabinets. A shattered window let in snowflakes that kissed the ground in silence. She moved toward the desk in the center of the room. A single book sat there, thick and leather-bound, pages stained with age. She opened it. A silver thread fell out. She stared at it. Not a bookmark, not decorative, just a thin cord of silver, twisted like wire, no longer than a finger. She turned the page. There it was. Serenia. The name was written in a sharp, foreign script. Underlined. Burned into the page almost as if carved with heat. Her breath hitched. A coldness swept her skin, not from the wind, but from something deeper. Recognition without understanding. Like her body knew something her mind refused to. She ran her fingers along the name. The page shivered beneath her touch. And then, everything went black. She stood on water. Still. Perfect. So smooth it held her weight like glass. Around her, darkness. Above her, stars. She looked down. Her reflection stared back, but not quite. The woman in the water had her face. But the expression was wrong. The mouth curled slightly in something not a smile. The lips were darker, touched with red. There was a bruise on her collarbone. A faint mark like teeth. And her eyes, Evelyn's eyes, were empty. Dead. She reached forward, wanting to touch the reflection. It moved first. The mirrored version of her raised a hand, slow and deliberate. Touched her own lips. And whispered, "You think you're loved?" Evelyn's breath stilled. The reflection smiled. "He's not kissing you," it said. "He's kissing my shadow." The lake beneath her rippled. The image blurred. And Evelyn screamed. She woke with a gasp, her body drenched in sweat. But it wasn't just that. Her arm burned. She threw back the covers. A strange shape shimmered under her skin, half-formed, like a sigil made of moonlight and ash. It pulsed once. Then again. Pain surged down her spine. She couldn't breathe. The door burst open. Serenik was there. He looked at her, really looked, and for a moment, his expression broke. Not into concern, but into something sharper, darker. His eyes glowed faintly. His hands were clenched at his sides. "What happened?" he demanded. I don't know. "Who touched you?" "No one. I was dreaming." He crossed the room and gripped her wrist, pulling up the sleeve. The sigil flickered once, then vanished. He swore under his breath. "Tell me," he said, voice low. "Tell me exactly what you saw." She stared at him, tears in her eyes. She looked like me, but she wasn't. She said, "He's kissing her shadow." He stilled. For a moment, she thought he might say something, anything. But he only whispered one word. Markion. Far beyond the manor walls, in a cavern where the moonlight did not reach, a man stood at the edge of a circle carved with ancient runes. His coat was black, his hair dark as coal, and his eyes held no color at all. He watched the silver cord in his fingers shimmer, a drop of blood clinging to the end. She responded, he said quietly. Yold, standing beside him, folded her arms. "That doesn't prove she's her." He didn't look away. "It proves she's waking." "You think she'll survive the transition?" "If she doesn't," Markion smiled faintly, "we'll make another." Chapter 6. The Mark He Wouldn't Admit. The manor was silent in the way old things are silent, too vast, too knowing, too still. Evelyn moved barefoot through the hall, her hand pressed to her side where the pain lingered like a dull echo. The mark had faded for now, but her skin still tingled, as if something beneath it stirred. The corridor outside the master chambers was empty, lit only by moonlight filtering through the tall, narrow windows. She had come seeking the apothecary cabinet. Serenik had shown her where it was once, near the northern stairwell, but the house never looked the same at night. Walls shifted. Shadows stretched. She turned the corner near the east wing, where the servants no longer went, and paused. A door stood open. Warm lamplight spilled into the corridor. She heard movement. Cloth brushing against skin. A drawer sliding. She should have turned away. Instead, she stepped closer. Serenik stood inside the room, his dressing chamber, she realized belatedly, half turned from her, his shirt still in his hands. His body was cut from shadow and bone, sharp lines softened by the golden glow of the fire. And then she saw it. Across his back, from left shoulder to right hip, was a mark. Not a scar. A brand. Its shape wasn't fully clear, age and distortion had rendered it jagged and strange, but it pulsed faintly, like embers that refused to die. The skin around it was marred, seared long ago, as if he'd tried to destroy whatever it once meant. She gasped. He turned sharply. Their eyes met. Neither of them spoke for a heartbeat. Then another. Who gave you that? Her voice was soft. Fractured. That mark, what is it? He didn't move. She stepped into the room. Is it a mate bond? She asked, slower this time, each word thick with dread. Did you belong to someone else? His jaw tightened. She took another step. Serenik. He looked away. That, he said, voice flat, is none of your concern. She blinked. How can you say that? He exhaled slowly, setting the shirt down. His spine remained rigid, hands curled into fists. It's gone, he said. Burned. Dead. You don't need to carry ghosts that aren't yours. But it was yours. Her voice broke around the edges. Wasn't it? He turned then, fully, his eyes dark and unreadable. I told you. It's over. That doesn't answer the question. He took a step toward her. Why do you want to know? Because I need to know if I'm, she swallowed, real. Silence. He looked at her, long and hard. Something flickered across his expression, pain, maybe. Regret. Or guilt so deeply rooted it had grown teeth. Finally, he said, you don't need a mark to be chosen. Her heart twisted. So you won't deny it. He was quiet again. Too quiet. She hugged her arms around herself. Who is she? Still nothing. She wanted to scream. To cry. To beg him to say something that would erase the doubt now blooming like rot in her chest. But all he did was close the space between them, slow and deliberate, until he stood so close she could smell the smoke and frost on his skin. His fingers brushed her cheek. I chose you. That's not the same. I could have left you in the forest. I would have rather died than be someone's second. His jaw clenched. Her voice cracked. Am I her? No. Her breath hitched. Then why won't you tell me her name? He said nothing. She turned from him, chest tight, eyes burning. The silence pressed on her skin like heat, and when he didn't follow, she walked out. The water in the bathing room steamed as she entered. She let the robe fall, revealing pale limbs, the soft curve of her back, the places his mouth had once lingered, soft, reverent, hungry. She stared into the mirror, watching herself undo her braid with trembling hands. Her reflection didn't look like hers tonight. She stepped into the bath. The water stung where the phantom mark had risen days before. She dipped lower until it covered her chest. Her fingers traced her collarbone, searching for some remnant of the heat of his touch. She found none. She had believed it meant something. That despite the silence and the shadows, she had been chosen, not because of fate, not because of prophecy, but because she was her. But now she wasn't sure who he saw when he looked at her. A lover? A mistake? A replacement? She stood, the water cascading down her skin. Her breath fogged the mirror. As she stepped out, she caught sight of something strange. Her back, just under the shoulder blade. A faint shimmer. She leaned closer. At first, it looked like a trick of the light. Then, slowly, the outline took shape, curved, ancient, wrong. Not hers. Her breath caught. The faint shape of a moonlit mark traced along her skin. Not visible in full, but enough. Enough to terrify. She backed away from the mirror. "I don't belong to anyone," she whispered. The reflection smiled. But her lips hadn't moved. Chapter 7. The Kiss Without a Name. The night smelled like burning pine and blood. Snow hadn't fallen yet, but the wind carried its promise. Evelyn stood on the frost-slicked stones of the greenhouse terrace, her breath forming pale ribbons in the cold. Beneath her slippers, red streaks marred the flagstones, still warm, still fresh. She pressed a hand to her chest as if to steady her lungs, but the air wouldn't come easy. The battle had ended just minutes before. Serenik had appeared like something summoned from the wild, his black coat torn open, teeth bared, and blood streaking down one side of his face. The rogue wolf, twice the size of any natural beast, maddened by bloodlust, had lunged straight for her. And Serenik had torn it apart with nothing but his bare hands. No shifting. No weapons. Just violence born of instinct. Brutal. Ferocious. Beautiful. Now he sat slouched on the cold stone bench, his breathing uneven, his shirt soaked through with blood. His left shoulder was slashed open, claw marks ripped deep into the muscle. "You shouldn't be standing," he muttered when she approached. "And you shouldn't be sitting in your own blood," she shot back. He didn't argue. She knelt beside him, fingers already reaching for the medical satchel someone had left on the edge of the greenhouse door. The glass panes glinted above them, fractured by claw swipes, casting shards of light down onto the floor. Evelyn uncorked the tincture with trembling hands. He didn't flinch when she pressed the cloth to his wound. But when her fingers brushed his bare skin, fever-hot and slick with sweat, he looked at her. She refused to meet his gaze. "You're an idiot," she whispered, voice brittle. "Charging like that. You could have died. I've survived worse. That's not the point." She dabbed at the blood, jaw tight. It wasn't just the adrenaline burning under her skin now. It was everything, the mark on his back, the way he wouldn't speak her name, the reflection in the mirror that didn't belong to her. She blinked, and her eyes burned. "Damn it," she muttered, turning away as a tear slipped loose. He noticed. "I'm not fragile," she said quickly, wiping her face with the back of her sleeve. "No," he said softly. "But you're hurting. Stop talking like you know me. I don't have to know you to see when something's broken." Her breath hitched. She pressed harder into the wound than necessary, and he winced. "Good," she said through clenched teeth. He chuckled, dry, sharp. "You're angry. I don't know what I am. Tell me." "Why?" she snapped, lifting her head. He didn't answer. And somehow that answer hurt worse. She looked at him then, really looked. At the dried blood on his jaw. The pale scar beneath his left eye. The barely healed burn at the edge of his collarbone. The wolf had nearly taken his arm, and he hadn't hesitated. Not once. For her. He had bled, killed, and sat here now, breathing like every rib hurt, and she still didn't know if she was real to him. Her throat closed. "I can't do this," she whispered. He started to rise. "Then don't." "No," she interrupted, stepping closer. "No, I mean." Her fingers found his jaw. She leaned in. And kissed him. Not because she wanted to seduce him. Not because the night had made her reckless. But because if she didn't do it now, the ache in her chest would eat her whole. It was soft. Just the barest press of her lips against the corner of his mouth. He went still. His body turned to stone beneath her hand. His breath caught. She froze. And then he kissed her back. It wasn't gentle. It was slow, deliberate, almost painful in its restraint. He didn't devour her, didn't pull her into his lap or press her against the wall like a man starved. He just tilted his head and let their mouths fit like they had always belonged. Her fingers curled into the fabric of his coat. His hands hovered, then settled on her waist, firm, grounding. She parted her lips to say something, but he was already pulling her closer, his breath hot against her cheek. And then he said it. Words so low she almost didn't hear them. "You finally came back." She froze. "What?" He didn't repeat it. She pulled back just enough to see his face. His eyes were closed. His lips still parted. She waited. But he said nothing more. Her heart fluttered wildly. She searched his face, desperate for meaning, for clarity, for anything. But all she saw was exhaustion. Hope bloomed in her chest anyway. He's accepted me, she thought. He's finally let me in. She helped him to his feet, guiding him through the empty hallway and up the narrow staircase to his chamber. He leaned on her more than he let on, his weight heavy and warm. At the top of the stairs, outside the bedroom door, he paused. His hand brushed her wrist. "I won't let you disappear again," he said. She smiled, soft, wide-eyed. "I won't." He leaned forward. His lips grazed her forehead. And then he was gone, inside the room, door shutting quietly behind him. She stood alone in the corridor, fingers touching her lips, heart pounding against her ribs like it had just been granted a new rhythm. She didn't even realize he'd never said her name. Chapter 8: The Nightmare Hunt. The first thing Evelyn heard in the dream was her own scream. It came before sight, before thought, an animal sound ripped from the core of her being, raw and primal. Then the blackness peeled away, and she was standing in the middle of a long, endless hallway. It stretched into infinity, its walls paneled in blackened mirrors, each one cracked, but not broken, each one showing a version of herself she didn't recognize. Some were smiling, some crying. One bled from the eyes. Another wore a wedding gown stained red at the hem. All of them watched her. None of them blinked. She tried to move, but her body wasn't responding quite right. Her limbs felt stitched together wrong. Her breath came too shallow, like her ribs didn't belong to her. Then came the voices. Not her name. Someone else's. Serena. 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 It echoed from every mirror, from the cracks in the glass, from the air itself. "No," Evelyn whispered, pressing her hands to her ears. "That's not me." But her reflection opened its mouth, and blood spilled down its chin. And then the pain started. Not from without, but from within. Her bones twisted beneath her skin. Her hands bent at the wrong angles. Her reflection laughed as her own face warped, eyes too wide, cheekbones sharp as glass, lips stretching into something beautiful and terrifying. "She's just the shell," said the mirror. Evelyn staggered backward, slamming into the mirrored wall behind her. It shattered on contact, slicing into her back, but she didn't bleed. She cracked. Like porcelain. Her hands fractured, hairline breaks racing along her arms, her chest. Chunks of her flesh fell away, not bloody, but hollow, and revealed another face beneath. Not hers. Same mouth. Same eyes. But colder. Smiling. Serena. The voices rose, overlapping. Serena. 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 "I'm not her." Evelyn screamed, falling to her knees. The floor beneath her gave way. She fell into darkness. She woke choking on her breath, the sheets tangled around her limbs, her skin slick with sweat and shivering in the frigid air. The bedroom was dark except for the faint amber glow of the fireplace. But the burn in her arms remained. She sat up, panting, and reached for the lamp. And froze. Silver lines traced the inside of her wrists like inked veins, glinting under her skin. Not tattooed. Not drawn. Etched. Thin. Elegant. Familiar. She pressed her palm to her chest. More of them. Like vines wrapping around her sternum, blooming from the base of her throat downward. The sigils didn't hurt, but they hummed faintly, as if alive. She stumbled out of bed and reached for her robe, tying it with shaking hands. The door opened before she could reach for it. Serenik stood in the threshold, dressed in black, barefoot, his eyes sharper than she'd ever seen them. "You felt it," he said. Not a question. Yes, her voice cracked. There were mirrors. And a name. I wasn't me. He stepped inside, moving straight to her without hesitation. His hands caught her wrists, turning them over gently to reveal the marks. The sigils shimmered. She flinched. What's happening to me? Dream interference, he said, voice calm. Someone entered your subconscious. Left traces. That wasn't a dream, she whispered. It tore me apart. She shook her head. I felt myself being rewritten. You weren't. Not fully. Not fully? So it was real. In a sense, he said, releasing her and turning to pace across the room. Dream realms are vulnerable to manipulation. Especially here. She hugged her arms around herself. Who is she? He didn't answer. Say her name, she whispered. He looked at her. You already know it. Serenia. The name felt wrong on her tongue. Heavy. Claimed. Serenik's jaw tensed. He's getting bolder. Who? He didn't speak. But she knew. Markion. He nodded. She lowered herself into the chair near the fire. Her legs couldn't hold her. He's trying to, what? Possess me? Replace, Serenik said. Rebuild. There's no difference in the end. She looked down at her arms. What are these symbols? Dream sigils. Wards. Carved into the astral form. He's binding you. Slowly. For what? His silence was answer enough. To wake her, she said bitterly. To make me into her. He sat across from her, elbows resting on his knees. He can't force it. But he can try. Yes. Have you seen these before? She asked, voice low. Yes. She looked at him sharply. He met her gaze without flinching. So you knew this could happen. I suspected. And you didn't warn me? I didn't want to frighten you. That wasn't your decision. I didn't think it had started. She rose. Until now. Yes. She walked to the mirror above the mantel. Her reflection looked back, no blood this time. No twisted limbs. But still, not right. What does he want from me? She asked softly. Not you, Serenik said. Just the vessel. She touched her face in the glass. And if I already have something of her inside me? He stood. Then we sever it. Before it roots. And if it's too late? His voice was ice. Then I destroy it. She turned to face him. And if destroying it destroys me? A pause. He stepped close. Then we find another way. She wanted to believe him. She really did. But something inside her whispered he wasn't trying to save her. He was trying to preserve what might be left of her. She slept again before dawn. The dream came quickly, too quickly, pulling her under before she could scream. This time, there was no hallway. Only a void. And a woman standing in it. Her face was Evelyn's. Her smile wasn't. I like your body, the woman said. It's soft. Loved. Well remembered. Evelyn couldn't speak. The woman circled her. But you don't belong in it. Evelyn tried to move. The woman touched her cheek. You're just the shell, she whispered. I can live for us both. She leaned forward and kissed Evelyn's lips. When Evelyn woke screaming, silver threads were burrowed beneath her skin, glinting under the flesh of her hands like living wires. The mark on her chest pulsed once, in rhythm with someone else's heartbeat. Chapter 9: The First Ceremony. The moon hung low and full, bloated with ancient light, as if watching from above with breathless anticipation. Evelyn stood barefoot at the center of the stone ring, her cloak slipping from her shoulders as the wind caught the edge of her hair. The mountain air was sharp enough to cut, and yet her skin burned. They had climbed for hours to reach the moon's spire altar, a place older than any city, older even than the bloodlines that had spilled across its stones. The wolves called it sacred. The dead called it home. And tonight, it would remember her. Her heartbeat echoed off the carved granite pillars, each etched with symbols she couldn't read but could almost feel, shapes that whispered beneath her ribs like forgotten lullabies. Fog curled around the edges of the altar, thick with magic and the scent of wildflowers grown only under silver light. Serenik stood before her. He wore black ceremonial garb open at the chest, sleeves rolled to the elbows, throat bare to the moon. His eyes shimmered faintly, reflecting the altar flames, and in his hands he held a small obsidian blade. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low. Evelyn nodded, even though she wasn't. Not really. Not since the dream. Not since the reflection that wasn't hers. But she had begged him for this. "I want something real," she'd said. And he had answered, "Then I'll give you what even fate cannot deny." Now her robe fell away entirely, bearing her back to the air and the gods. He stepped behind her, footsteps quiet on the stone. "There will be pain," he murmured, "but only for a moment." "I'm not afraid of pain," she said. He paused. "I know," he whispered. "You wear it like silk." She closed her eyes as his fingertips brushed her shoulder blades, gently guiding her into a kneel. The stone beneath her knees was shockingly cold. Her breath came faster, misting in the air. She could hear the faint hum of magic stirring in the altar's veins. She felt him kneel behind her, felt the warmth of his thighs against hers, the steadiness of his hands as they settled on her waist. Then, the kiss of the blade. A prick. A drop of blood. Another. And then his voice, soft, in a language she didn't know. The air thickened. She swayed slightly, but he steadied her. "Give me your hand," he said. She reached behind her blindly. He took it in his, and together, their palms pressed, bleeding skin to bleeding skin. The magic answered. The ring of stones around them flared with silver light. A sudden pressure pushed against her spine, and she gasped as heat etched itself into her skin, scorching a pattern she couldn't see but felt deep, deep inside. She arched, fighting back a cry. "Breathe," he whispered, holding her tighter. "Let it take." She tried, but her mind blurred. His hands were on her again, one at her hip, the other steadying her back as her body leaned into his. They knelt together in the fog, surrounded by firelight and shadow. She didn't know when her head fell against his shoulder, only that it did. That his breath was hot against her temple. That she felt claimed. Wanted. Safe. Not like prey, but like purpose. His voice grew lower. Softer. A prayer. A vow. Blood to blood. Bone to bone. Breath to breath. The fog thickened around them, curling with the rhythm of their bodies as the ceremony deepened, ritual mingling with something more. She felt his warmth seep into her through every point of contact. Felt the brush of his lips against the shell of her ear, his breath stuttering slightly as his hands slid from sacred to sinful in the space between one heartbeat and the next. And still, she let him. Because it felt like love. Because she needed it to be. Because she wanted to believe that the mark on her skin, the tremble in his fingers, the hitch in his breath, all of it was for her. Not for someone else. Not for a ghost. Not for a name that wasn't hers. She was already slipping into unconsciousness when she heard him speak again, words brushing against her skin like wind. "Say." It was barely more than breath. She wanted to ask what he said. But the world tilted. Her eyes closed. His lips grazed her nape. "Serenia." "No," she thought distantly. "That's not me." But her body was too heavy, her mind too soft. And then the last whisper, so quiet it felt like it came from inside her chest. "Come back to me." Darkness claimed her before she could ask who he was calling home. Chapter 10. The Girl in the Mirror Room. The air in the West Wing always felt colder. It wasn't just the stone, or the lack of firelight. It was something deeper. Something still. Evelyn walked carefully down the narrow corridor, the soles of her boots whispering against the ancient floor. Her fingers skimmed the wall beside her, tracing patterns in the frost-laced wallpaper. She hadn't meant to wander this far. But ever since the ceremony at the moon's fire, sleep came less and less, and when it did, it brought fragments of silver sigils, blood-slick altars, and a voice whispering a name that wasn't hers. Now, days later, she was fully healed. Or at least, her body was. Her mind frayed more by the hour. Serenik hadn't spoken of the ceremony since. He'd kissed her temple before carrying her down the mountain, but his silence afterward rang louder than any vow. He didn't speak her name when they passed in the hallways. He looked at her as if searching for something behind her face. And every time he touched her, it was as if he were remembering something else. Tonight, she couldn't stand the weight of that silence. So she walked. The west wing was supposed to be sealed. Yet a door stood ajar at the end of the corridor. She pushed it open. Inside was dust and darkness, a space untouched for years, yet somehow humming with energy, like a held breath. A single candelabra flickered in the far corner, casting long, flickering shadows across the walls. Evelyn stepped forward. Then she saw them. Mirrors. Dozens. Some full-length, others cracked. Frames of bone-white wood, tarnished silver, rusted iron. They lined the room like sentinels, angled inward. At the center stood one grand mirror, taller than a man, its surface gleaming like still water. She moved closer. The air shifted. Her own reflection stared back. Except, no, not quite. She tilted her head left. The reflection tilted right. She raised her hand. The reflection raised it, half a beat too slow. Evelyn's breath caught. She blinked. The woman in the mirror blinked back, but not in unison. Her own face. Her features. But the eyes were wrong. Sharper. Older. Lips redder. The set of her shoulders more confident, like someone who knew she belonged. The reflection smiled. Evelyn did not. The air behind her stirred. She whirled. Yold stood in the doorway, clad in blue silk and shadow, her arms crossed, lips pulled into something too sly to be kind. "This part of the manor is closed," Evelyn said, trying to hide the tremble in her voice. Yold's gaze didn't shift from the mirror. "And yet, here you are." "I didn't. It was open." "It opens for those who remember where it leads." Evelyn frowned. "I don't understand." "No," Yold murmured, finally stepping inside. "You don't." She circled the room, her heels clicking softly. The flames from the candelabra leapt higher with each step, as if they, too, recognized her power. Evelyn turned back to the mirror. The reflection still stared. Still smiled. "Who is she?" Evelyn whispered. Yold tilted her head. "Isn't it obvious?" "It's me." "But—" "Not quite," Yold supplied smoothly. "She's what remains. Or perhaps, what waits." Evelyn swallowed hard. "It's a trick. A glamour." Yold laughed softly. "Is that what you want it to be?" "She doesn't move like me." "No," the witch said, circling behind her. "She doesn't." Evelyn could feel Yold's presence behind her like a second spine, poised and watching. "I've seen her before," Evelyn whispered. "Not here," Yold said. "But in the corners of your dreams. In the shimmer of glass. In Serenik's eyes." That name made Evelyn stiffen. "He never said." "Of course he didn't." "What is this place?" Yold turned to face the central mirror. "We call it the memory room." "A terrible misnomer, really." "It's not your memory. It's hers." "Hers? You've met her already." "I haven't." "She's the reason the mark clings to your skin even now. The reason you wake with someone else's tears on your face." Evelyn shook her head. "That's not true." Yold looked at her then, really looked. "You're sure you're the one who's awake?" The candelabra guttered. Evelyn's breath caught. She turned back to the mirror. The woman in the reflection had not stopped smiling, but her hands were now pressed against the glass, like she wanted out. "I'm not her," Evelyn said quietly. Yold gave a non-committal hum. "You keep saying that." Evelyn turned to leave. Her footsteps were unsteady now, her pulse loud in her ears. But before she could reach the door, Yold's voice called after her. "Tell me, Evelyn, when was the last time you saw your own reflection and believed it was you?" Evelyn didn't answer. She fled the room. That night, she stood in front of her bedroom mirror. Alone. The firelight danced across the surface, warm and mundane, nothing magical about it. And yet, her hand hesitated. Slowly, she raised it. Touched the glass. The mirror woman touched back, but a fraction too late. Evelyn's breath hitched. She stepped back, the chill crawling up her spine. "I'm me," she whispered. "I'm me." But her voice sounded wrong. And the mirror woman was still smiling. Chapter 11. The Name Etched in Bone. The wind in Wolfsbane Hollow never stopped moving. It breathed through the bare trees like a living thing, curling around Evelyn's ankles as she followed Serenik down the winding trail. The deeper they walked into the burial grounds, the quieter the world became, as though sound itself feared to trespass here. Serenik had said little when he woke her before dawn. "Dress warmly" was all he'd offered. She had obeyed without question, drawn by the gravity in his voice. Now, bundled in a dark wool cloak, boots crunching on frost-bitten soil, she followed him through the woods until the trees thinned and the land dipped. The burial hollow appeared like something born from the bones of giants. Monolithic stones jutted from the ground in tight, silent rows. There were no names carved visibly. No flowers. Only ash-colored markers and cold light dripping from the overcast sky. The snow here didn't settle. It melted the moment it touched the ground, steam curling from the soil like breath from the dead. Serenik stopped at the edge of the path, turning to her. "This place is only shown to those who are bound to the bloodline," he said. Evelyn nodded, uncertain. "And you brought me here because—" He looked past her toward the stones. "Legacy matters. If you are to stand beside me, you should know what you stand on." That was the closest he had ever come to saying she belonged. Her heart fluttered despite herself. They walked in silence through the narrow passageways between tombs, the stones older than memory, some etched in runes she couldn't decipher. She saw wolf engravings, coiled serpents, faded images of moons and bone trees. Then she saw it. A single stone, smaller than the others, set apart near the base of a dead sycamore. Unlike the rest, this one bore initials. SD. She stopped walking. Her breath misted the air. Serenik didn't move. "Who is this?" she asked, though her throat tightened even as she said it. He didn't answer. There were no offerings around the stone. No symbols. Only a single flower, wilted and frost-blackened. She crouched, reaching toward it. The moment her fingers brushed the surface of the stone, pain stabbed up her arm like fire laced with ice. She cried out, stumbling back and clutching her hand. The stone shimmered. Letters bloomed like blood from beneath the surface, black on black. Serenia Drellthorn. Her breath caught. "No," she whispered. No, that can't be." She turned to Serenik, whose face had gone as still as the stone around them. "Who is she?" "A relative," he said, voice unreadable. Distant. "Why didn't you say her name?" "Because it doesn't matter." "She shares your name." "Many have," he said, too quickly. Evelyn's stomach churned. Her palm still burned. "She was your mate," she said, voice barely audible. He didn't confirm. He didn't deny. Why did the stone react to me? Serenik stepped forward, pulling her gently to her feet. "You're tired. The old magic plays tricks. This place isn't kind to outsiders." "But I'm not an outsider," she said, voice shaking. "You said—" "You're mine," he said flatly. "That's all that matters." She searched his face for softness. Found none. Only a wall she hadn't realized was always there. He turned away, cloak billowing behind him. Evelyn looked back at the stone. The name had vanished. The initials remained. SD. She rubbed her chest, where the pain was beginning to stir again. The walk back was quiet. Neither of them looked at each other. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her back ached with a dull throb, then a sharp sting. She stripped her nightdress and turned to the mirror. The mark, the one placed on her spine during the ceremony, was no longer faint. It pulsed, glowed, as if responding to something deep underground. She curled into herself beneath the blankets, cold sweat clinging to her skin. When sleep finally claimed her, it was not peaceful. A whisper came, breath hot against her ear. "You're in my bed." She flinched. You wear my name. She tried to move, but her body was lead. You walk in my place. Then, the voice coiled deep in her chest. And you still think he's calling for you? Evelyn woke screaming, back arching in pain. And outside her window, something howled. Chapter 12. The Liar Who Loved Too Much. The storm hit just after midnight. Evelyn stood at the window of the main tower bedroom, watching the black clouds roll over the ridgelines like an angry tide. The glass rattled in the panes. Wind screamed between the stones of Drellthorn Manor, and somewhere below a shutter banged loose. She didn't flinch. Not even when the door opened behind her. She knew it would be him. I saw her name, she said without turning. Her voice was calm, but something trembled beneath it. In the burial hollow. On a stone. Serenia Drellthorn. Silence. Then, the door closed with a quiet click. She heard his footsteps, measured, slow. You weren't supposed to see that. Evelyn turned to face him. Serenik stood in the doorway, rain slicking his hair against his forehead, his coat still wet from patrol. He looked tired, but not surprised. You told me legacy mattered, she said. You told me I needed to understand what I stood on. But you didn't tell me I was walking on someone else's grave. She's dead, he said flatly. That's all you need to know. It's not all I want to know. His jaw clenched. His eyes, always gray, now shimmered faintly with gold. Evelyn took a step forward. Who is she to you? He said nothing. The mark on your back, she continued, forcing the words through a tightening throat. The whispers in my dreams. The way you never say my name when you hold me. You keep telling me I'm yours, but you've never said it. Never said my name. Still he said nothing. I'm not her, she said. But you want me to be. His eyes flared, wolfish now, bright and dangerous. She's gone, he snapped. She burned. She bled. And she's not coming back. Then why do you keep looking at me like I might break into pieces if you let me go? He took a step toward her. She backed away. Tell me the truth. You want the truth? His voice dropped low, rough. Fine. He moved so fast she didn't have time to think. One moment, she stood by the hearth, hands clenched at her sides. The next, her back hit the stone wall, breath knocked from her lungs. His arms bracketed her shoulders, his body pressing close, not touching, but close enough to cage. Heat radiated from him in waves, and his eyes, fully shifted now, glowed like twin moons in the dark. You're not her, he growled. And yet you wear her scent. You bleed her power. You dream her dreams. You call my name with the same voice, the same mouth. He stopped himself, chest heaving. You think I don't know it's wrong, he whispered. That every time I touch you, I wonder if I'm conjuring a ghost? Evelyn stared up at him, heart racing. Her fingers curled against the wall behind her. And still, he said, voice rough, I can't stop. She opened her mouth to speak, but he cut her off, his body shifting closer, his breath hot against her cheek. I won't let you leave, he said. Not now. Not ever. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought he could hear it. Not because she was afraid. Because part of her didn't want to run. He leaned closer, the tip of his nose grazing the curve of her jaw. Even if you're not her, he murmured, you're mine now. The words should have chilled her. But they didn't. Instead, heat curled low in her stomach. Her breath caught in her throat. She hated how much she wanted to believe him. That he wasn't confusing her for someone else. That he wasn't just holding on because he was afraid of letting go of a memory. She turned her face slightly, letting her lips brush his. It was barely a kiss. But he seized it. His mouth met hers with desperate intensity, all teeth and heat and need. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, his body pressing her into the wall with a kind of feverish possession. Evelyn whimpered against his lips. She should have pulled back. Should have demanded answers. Instead, she clung to him. Because in that moment, she didn't care if she was a stand-in. Didn't care if the name he whispered in his sleep wasn't hers. He needed her. And she wanted to be needed. They broke apart only when breath became necessity. He rested his forehead against hers. His voice, ragged, whispered, "Stay." She nodded. He stepped back, slowly, releasing her as if it hurt. Without a word, he turned and walked from the room. Later that night, long after she had fallen asleep in his bed, Serenik returned. He didn't wake her. He sat at the edge of the mattress, his fingers brushing lightly across the mark between her shoulder blades, the one he'd carved with blood and vow. It pulsed faintly beneath his touch. Not like hers. Not quite. He traced the edges with reverent care, eyes unreadable. "Please," he whispered, voice cracking. "Even if you're not her, don't wake up." Chapter 13, The Second Ritual's Shadow. The moment Evelyn's eyes closed, the world beneath her vanished. There was no sensation of slipping into sleep, no gentle fade from consciousness. One breath, she lay curled in the warmth of the manor's grand bed. The next, her feet were bare on stone, and the air around her reeked of salt and bone. She stood in a temple made entirely of white. Not marble. Bone. Walls of vertebrae. Pillars of femurs. A vaulted ceiling laced with ribs arranged like wings mid-snap. Torches lit themselves in sequence as she moved, one by one down the corridor, flames flickering silver blue. Her breath caught in her throat. Her bare skin prickled with wrongness. The kind of dread that crawled behind the eyes before the mouth could name it. She didn't remember walking. She simply was here. Her nightdress clung to her damp skin as if she had passed through water or blood. Ahead, a wide chamber opened like a waiting mouth. A shrine. The center was a sunken altar surrounded by a pool of black water, so still it reflected the walls in perfect mirror. The water rippled once as she approached. And on the far wall, hanging high above the altar, was a painting. A portrait. Of her. No, not her. She moved closer, heart thudding louder with every step. The woman in the painting had her face, yes, but not her eyes. Hers were colder. A queen's eyes. A predator's. Her lips were painted dark, slightly parted, as though mid-command. The red of her dress bled into the background like it had been spilled, not brushed. Below the portrait, a name was etched into the wall. Serenia Drellthorn. "No," Evelyn whispered. But her body wouldn't move away. Her hands trembled as she turned to leave, to run, anywhere but here. But the shrine behind her was no longer empty. Serenik stood at the altar. Bare-chested. Barefoot. His hair tousled as if from a storm, silver eyes glowing with raw, unguarded hunger. In his arms was a woman. Also bare. Pressed against him. Serenia. The real one. Or some echo of her. Her back arched beneath his hands, her head thrown back in a gasp Evelyn couldn't hear. His mouth traced the line of her throat as if memorizing it, fingers gripping her hips like he'd never let go. "No," Evelyn breathed. "No, this isn't." But it was. And it didn't stop. Her knees hit the edge of the black pool. She tried to pull away from the vision, but the water glowed now, pale veins of silver rippling through it. The surface shimmered. And then, her reflection shifted. Not into Serenik, but into Serenia. She sat opposite Evelyn, wearing her skin better than Evelyn ever had. Beautiful. Composed. Whole. "You're just a gate," Serenia said, voice curling around Evelyn like smoke. Evelyn shook her head. "You're not real. I am what's left. What's waiting? What's his? You're not me." "No," Serenia whispered. "But I will be." Evelyn stood, shaking, backing away from the water. She turned and walked straight into a body. A hand seized her throat, not choking, just pressing, reminding her that breath could be taken at any moment. Martian's voice curved around her ear like silk cut with razors. "She's responding faster now." Too fast, another voice, Yold's, responded from behind the bone pillars. "If the imprint sets before the mind yields, she'll fracture." "She already is." Then push deeper. Evelyn tried to fight, to scream, to run, but her limbs refused. Her knees hit the floor again. She stared up at the altar where Cyrenik and Serenia remained locked in a sacred, intimate spiral, touch to touch, flesh to flesh, utterly oblivious to her presence. The water behind her surged, then drew her in. Evelyn's hands hit the mirror-like surface and slid inside it like silk. She gasped. She was kneeling now in a second shrine, this one entirely mirrored. Floor, ceiling, walls. Herself reflected back 1,000 times, but none of them moved when she did. They stood still, smiling. Serenia stood among them. She stepped forward, took Evelyn's chin in her fingers, bent, and kissed her. Evelyn choked on the breath of it, on the strange electricity that pulsed through her skin as her own face kissed her with terrifying gentleness. "You're nothing but a vessel," Serenia whispered. "I'm me," Evelyn gasped. But the mirrors behind her said otherwise. "I have his love," Serenia continued. "His mark. His madness. You were simply the skin I left behind." Evelyn pulled back, desperate, heart splintering. "I won't let you take me." "You have no say," Serenia said. "Then I'll fight." "You already lost." The mirrored walls cracked, hairline fractures spiraling outward from every reflection until the entire room began to shatter inward. She screamed. The altar, the bone chamber, the water, all of it collapsed. And as it did, she saw one final vision. Cyrenik, standing in the center of the ruin, head turned, golden eyes locked on her. He smiled. But it wasn't for her. "Serenia," he said, voice thick with grief and awe, "I finally found you." "No," Evelyn shrieked. "I'm not her." But he was already moving toward the image in his mind. Toward her, but not really. Not ever. And Evelyn fell back into her own body with a scream so sharp it cut the silence of her room in half. Her sheets were soaked with sweat. Her hands trembled. But worse, she could still feel the kiss on her mouth, the taste of herself, and the burn of Cyrenik's name. But not hers. Chapter 14, The Brand That Burned Back. Evelyn woke screaming. The sound tore from her throat like a blade, raw and involuntary, as if her own voice had betrayed her. She twisted in the bed, sheets tangled around her limbs, clutching at her spine where the searing pain still flared. Her back was burning. Not like fever. Not like memory. This was fire from within, pulsing, growing, reshaping. She stumbled from the bed, dragging herself to the mirror with half-blinded eyes. Her nightdress stuck to her skin, damp with sweat and something darker, blood? No, not blood. Ink. Silver-black ink seeped through the fabric between her shoulder blades. She reached over her shoulder, fingers shaking, and tore the nightdress open at the back. And froze. The mark had changed. The once elegant arc of the bonding sigil, delicate as a crescent moon, had twisted into something jagged, unfamiliar. It pulsed like a second heartbeat, glowing faintly beneath her skin. Like something alive. "No," she whispered, stumbling back. She grabbed a blanket from the floor, wrapping herself as panic surged. She turned, staggering toward the door, only to find it already swinging open. Yold stood there, as if summoned by fear itself. She leaned casually against the frame, arms folded, not even pretending to mask her satisfaction. "Well," the witch said, "it looks like she's settling in nicely." Evelyn blinked through the sweat stinging her eyes. "What?" Yold stepped inside, slow and elegant, her boots echoing against the cold stone floor. "I warned you. In the mirror. In the dreams. You just didn't want to hear it. What's happening to me?" Yold tilted her head. "You already know. Make it stop." "You can't," she said simply. "That's the price of being a vessel. Eventually, the wine forgets the cup it's in." "I'm not a vessel." Yold's smile was pitying. "No, sweet thing. You're a mistake." Evelyn's knees gave out, and she collapsed beside the hearth, clutching the edge of a chair as nausea rolled through her. She tried to breathe, but the pain at her back throbbed again, sharp and burning, as if the mark had teeth. "She's coming back," Yold said. "And there's less of you every hour. I won't let her in." Yold crouched beside her. "You won't get a choice." Evelyn struck. The fire iron sat propped near the stone hearth. She grabbed it in a blind, furious swing. But Yold caught her wrist mid-arc. The witch leaned in, eyes glinting. "Strike while you still remember your name." She released her with a hard shove and turned, gliding out of the room without another word. Evelyn's body shook. Her skin itched. Her mind fractured. She ran. Not through the main corridors, where guards might stop her, but downward, through the servants' passages, down the spiraling stone steps into the belly of Drelthorn Manor, to the stone chamber beneath the temple. She had only seen it once. Serenik had taken her there before the first ceremony. A place older than the manor, older than the bloodline, carved into the foundation of the mountain itself. The walls pulsed with old magic. The floor was inscribed with ancient runes. And in the center, a slab of obsidian, cold and waiting. She stepped onto it. The mark on her back flared. She screamed. The stone answered. It glowed beneath her feet, the runes brightening as if recognizing her or the thing inside her. She stripped the ruined nightdress from her body and stood naked before the mirror mounted at the far end of the chamber. She turned and saw it. The mark had changed completely now. It wasn't hers. It never had been. "Get out," she hissed at the reflection. "Get out of me." The mirror flickered. Her own eyes stared back. But she didn't blink. Didn't breathe. It wasn't her anymore. Evelyn snatched the ceremonial blade from the offering bowl on the sidewall. She didn't hesitate. She stabbed. Not into her heart. Into her back. The blade bit her shoulder as far as her angle allowed, twisting, dragging, scraping the skin above the mark. She screamed again. But the mark didn't break. It shimmered, laughed, and healed beneath her fingers. "Please," she sobbed, collapsing to the floor. "Please, please stop." She tried again, this time with the silver needle she'd hidden in the folds of her blanket. Drove it straight into the heart of the brand. Nothing. Just light. And her own reflection, now grinning back with Serena's mouth. "I'm real," Evelyn whispered. "I'm real, I'm..." But she wasn't sure anymore. She lay on the stone floor, blood seeping from her back, eyes wide. The chamber went still. Then, a voice. Not loud. Not even spoken aloud. Just there, curling beneath her thoughts, sliding under her tongue like a parasite finding home. "Move aside, darling. I'm coming back now." Chapter 15. The Wolf's Confession. The fever didn't break. For 3 nights and 2 hollowed-out days, Evelyn burned. She tossed beneath silk sheets soaked with sweat, her skin flushed red with something that wasn't entirely sickness. Her breath came in shallow gulps, her body convulsing with dreams so tangled they left claw marks across her mind. Names she'd never spoken echoed behind her ribs. Faces she didn't own looked back from glass. And always, always, there was pain at her spine. The brand. The mark. Her name rewritten again and again in flesh that tried to remember itself. She didn't. Couldn't. The room was kept dark, the windows barred, the servants forbidden to enter. Only Yold came once, and not to heal her, merely to observe. To wait. She said nothing when she left. But someone else remained. The great black wolf didn't leave her side. He didn't eat. He didn't sleep. He didn't shift. Serenik Drelthorn, Alpha, Prince, Terror of the North, curled at the foot of her bed in full beast form, eyes open, breath steady, always watching. His fur bristled at any sound from the hall. He growled when her body convulsed with another wave of pain. He licked her temple when she whimpered in dreams that weren't hers. His paws left blood prints on the floor from where he had ripped open his own claws pacing through the night. And still, he didn't leave. On the 3rd night, Evelyn broke the silence. Her voice, cracked and dry, slipped from her lips like a prayer lost on wind. I'm not her. The wolf lifted his head. She trembled, eyes fluttering but not opening. Her hands twisted in the blankets, fighting something unseen. I'm not her, she whispered again. You can't. I'm not her. He stood then, slow and shaking, every movement strained. And then he spoke, not in words, but in that strange, low hum of thought wolves shared when they didn't shift, but needed to be understood. I don't care who you are. I just want you to stay. Evelyn stilled. Her body relaxed. She didn't wake, but her heart somewhere heard it. Dawn bled through the windows. The fever had finally receded, leaving her pale and hollow-eyed but breathing steady. Evelyn stirred under the weight of too many dreams and too little clarity. She blinked at the ceiling, unfamiliar and grand, and turned her head toward the sound of something rasping softly outside the chamber. The door was open just a crack. Beyond it, in the cold hallway of the wolf guard chamber, lay him. Serenik. No longer in wolf form. Naked. His back pressed to the wall, his knees drawn toward his chest in something that was too vulnerable to be sleep and too still to be comfort. His skin was streaked with red, half-healed scratches, bites from his own teeth. He looked smaller like that. Not the king of wolves. Not the cold, controlling alpha. Just a man. Broken. Guarding her door like a dog with nothing left but devotion. Her chest constricted. He had stayed. All this time, he had stayed. She sat up slowly, the sheets falling from her shoulders. Why? She whispered, voice still rough. He didn't stir. She stood on shaky legs and crossed the room, each step quiet as a question. When she reached him, she knelt. He didn't open his eyes. He didn't need to. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and gently touched his shoulder. He flinched, but only slightly. I'm here, she whispered. Still, he didn't speak. But the shiver that ran through him said enough. She looked at him, truly looked, and saw the toll in every inch of his body. The sleeplessness. The restraint. The madness curling at the edges of his silence. She remembered what he'd said in the dream. Or thought he had. I don't care who you are. I just want you to stay. Her breath caught. He hadn't said her name. Not once. But he had stayed. And that, in her desperation, in her unraveling belief that she mattered, felt like enough. She wrapped her arms around his shoulders from behind, careful not to startle. Her cheek pressed to his skin. I'll stay, she whispered. If you love me. He inhaled sharply, but said nothing. His muscles tensed beneath her. And then slowly, his eyes opened. Not gray. Not gold. Something brighter. Wilder. Burning. She felt it before she saw it. Something else, someone else, watching her through his silence. But she didn't pull away. Not yet. Because she needed to believe this was love. Even if it was madness. Even if it was grief. Even if she was only the space someone else used to occupy. Chapter 16. The Dream with Another Face. She dreamed of stone and silence. No fire. No light. No breath of wind to stir the banners that hung limp from vaulted pillars like forgotten prayers. The air smelled of ash and copper, heavy and sharp, like something burned too long on sacred ground. Evelyn stood in the center of the temple, though she didn't remember arriving. The floor beneath her feet was cold and ancient, etched with sigils worn smooth by time or blood. Mist crept along the ground, curling around her ankles. The chamber ahead pulsed with unnatural stillness, like the heart of something waiting to wake. She heard footsteps, then breath, then a voice, low, trembling, not hers. A man's. Serenik. She stepped toward the sound, heart stuttering with each footfall, until she reached the doorway to the inner sanctum. What she saw rooted her to the ground. At the center of the room stood a stone altar, dark with blood that hadn't dried. Serenik knelt before it, sleeves rolled to his elbows, his hands drenched in red. Lying atop the altar was a woman. Naked. beautiful. Still. Her hair was black silk spilled across the altar's edge, her lips parted in soft surrender. A silver pendant lay broken across her collarbone. Her chest bore a wound, deep, precise, made not in frenzy, but with deliberation. And the knife, still in his hand. Cyrenik trembled as he lifted the woman's body, drawing her upright into his arms. Blood soaked his shirt, smeared his jaw, streaked the bridge of his nose. His breath came in ragged gasps. "Forgive me," he whispered, voice cracking. She didn't answer. Her head lolled against his shoulder. His hands cupped her face. Fingers brushed strands of dark hair from her forehead. And then, he kissed her. Soft, desperate, lingering. Not on her cheek. Not her brow. Her mouth. Still warm. Still bleeding. "Forgive me," he said again, voice hollow. And then her name. Spoken like a wound. Serenia. Evelyn's scream caught in her throat. She couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. She knew what this was. Not nightmare. Not vision. Memory. Somehow impossibly real. And she was inside it. She stepped back, but the stone beneath her feet cracked. The altar's light dimmed. Cyrenik's head turned. His eyes found her in the shadows, but they weren't the same eyes she knew. They weren't cold or guarded or afraid. They were dead. "Who are you?" he asked. But the voice came not from his mouth, but from behind her, Martian's voice, sliding into her ears like oil under skin. "Truth hurts more when it's remembered, doesn't it?" "Get out," Evelyn gasped. "Get out of my head." "You wanted to know what he hides," Markion murmured. "Now you know." The world trembled. The altar cracked down the center. Cyrenik's arms closed tighter around Serenia's corpse, his mouth pressed to her throat like a final claim. Evelyn turned and ran. But the hall didn't end. She ran through corridors of bone, through vaulted halls lined with mirrors reflecting only her, bleeding from wounds that weren't there. When she finally fell, it was not into darkness, but into cold, wet sheets. She bolted upright in bed, chest heaving. The room was dark. The fire had gone out. Moonlight spilled through the window in thin slivers. Her hands trembled violently. She lifted them and froze. Blood. Her fingers were stained. Not imagined. Not from a dream. Dark, drying blood streaked her palms, smeared between her fingers. She scrambled out of bed, stumbling toward the hearth. There was no pain on her skin. No wound. But she could feel the tremor still, pulsing in her bones. On the floor beside the fire sat a single object. Small. Metallic. She picked it up with numb fingers. A ring. Silver. Worn. Etched inside with a name. Serenia. Her knees hit the floor. The silence pressed in like a scream. And in that moment, her last thread of denial snapped. He had killed her. The woman he once loved. Held her even as she bled beneath him. Mourned her. Kissed her cold mouth. Whispered her name. And now, he looked at Evelyn with the same eyes. Touched her with the same hands. Whispered nothing, because every word had already been spent. Every vow, every hunger, every wound, already given. To someone else. She clutched the ring to her chest. "I'm not her," she whispered. But the room remained quiet. And the brand on her back pulsed like a lie. Chapter 17. The Truth Carved in Bone. The door to the stone archive groaned open with the weight of centuries. Evelyn stepped inside, the lantern in her hand casting flickering light over the carved walls. The scent of old dust and ash choked the air, earthy and heavy, as if the breath of the dead lingered in the stones. Here, beneath the main halls of Drelthorn, the past was not written with ink. It was carved into bone. The shelves were long rows of white, bleached fragments, rib plates etched with names, spines inked in clan laws, skulls bearing lineages scratched across craniums like warnings. It was beautiful in a way that made her skin crawl. She moved through the cold corridor slowly, trailing her fingers across one wall. She hadn't meant to come here. Not truly. But after the dream, the kiss, the altar, the name that had never been hers, something in her had snapped. Not in rage. Not even in fear. In the quiet way something finally gives up. She needed the truth. She needed it carved so deeply no one could deny it. Her fingers brushed over a shoulder blade on the archive table, and the writing shifted with the movement of her hand. Runic script rippled like heat waves. Her lantern caught on one sigil that pulsed faintly, and beneath it, in smaller, thinner script, were 4 words. Serenia Drellthorn, Dream-Bound General. Evelyn's breath caught. She leaned closer. The text beneath it was an old WIREM tongue, an archaic dialect she barely understood, but she'd studied enough with the court tutors to make out key terms. Emotion mirroring. Subconscious incursion. Mental bond enforcement. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't just someone with a charming voice or a sharp mind. Serenia had been a dream controller, a rare, near-extinct class of telepath who could reshape perception, who could imprint memories, who could rewrite feelings. A woman who could make entire armies obey her by branding their minds with desire, need, loyalty. And Evelyn. She had been dreaming things that felt like memories. Feeling things that didn't belong to her. She turned sharply and scanned the archive shelves until she found it. A femur bone, longer than the others, polished smooth, inscribed with tight, neat script. The label, Drellthorn, Private Confessionals. She lifted it with trembling hands and held it under the lantern. The words blurred. Her eyes stung. But she read it. I burned her with my own hand. Because I had to. Because she asked. Because I couldn't let the others have her. But I made a vow, across realms, across time, that I would bring her back. I have prepared her return. I have watched. Waited. Carved the shape of her in every lover I could not keep. One day, she will look through another's eyes and know me. I will give everything for that moment. Even my soul. S.D. The bones slipped from her hands. It clattered to the floor, the sound echoing like a war drum in the silence. She staggered back, hand pressed to her mouth. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't coincidence. It had never been about her. She wasn't some unexpected miracle that Serenic had come to love in defiance of fate. She was a plan. A body. A door. She fled the archive without thinking, skirts tangling at her ankles, lantern still swinging wildly from her fingers. Up the spiral stairs. Through the stone corridor. Into the long, echoing hallway that led to the war room above. He was there. Serenic. Standing by the hearth with a decanter of wine in his hand, staring into the flames. He turned when she entered, and his eyes lit with something that, before, might have made her stomach flutter. Not tonight. She held the lantern up. His smile died. I read your words, she said, voice raw. On the bone. He said nothing. I saw her face. I saw you kill her. I saw you, she choked. I thought it was a dream. But it wasn't, was it? Still, he didn't speak. You brought me here to wait, she whispered. To be shaped. To become her. You thought I was her, didn't you? He closed his eyes. That silence was answer enough. She flinched as though struck. Say it, she said. Say it out loud. He opened his mouth. And stopped. Then, finally, in a voice more breath than sound. I tried to forget. The fire crackled. She stared at him like he was a stranger. Because maybe he always had been. I tried to let you be your own person, he said. I tried to stop looking for her in your eyes. She shook her head. You kissed me with her mouth. I couldn't. You touched me with her name in your head, she snapped. You carved your vow into me like I was her body. He took a step forward. She stepped back. Don't, she said. Evelyn. No, she whispered. You don't get to say my name like it means something now. Tears welled, but didn't fall. She wouldn't give him that. I should have known, she said. From the way you held me like I was already familiar. From the way you never looked at me like someone new. I wanted to love you. You wanted to resurrect her. She turned away, walking to the door. "You're wrong," he said quietly. She stopped. But she didn't turn. "I wasn't trying to bring her back," he said. "I was trying to believe you were her, so I wouldn't have to grieve again." She said nothing, only opened the door, and walked out. The snow was falling again. Soft, white, slow. Evelyn stood at the edge of the forest, cloak wrapped tight around her shoulders, the ring with Serena's name buried in her pocket like a weight she couldn't shed. She didn't cry. She had cried too much. She only whispered, to the cold and the trees and the wolves hiding in the dark. "I was never the one you were waiting for." Her breath misted in the air. "So why did you drag me into the fire with you?" Chapter 18. The runaway who wasn't herself. The snow had swallowed the path behind her. Evelyn ran. The wind sliced across her cheeks like thin razors, but she didn't stop. Her lungs burned with every breath, her legs buckled beneath the weight of exhaustion, but she kept going. The forest clawed at her cloak. The sky overhead churned with the threat of another storm, but none of it mattered. She couldn't stay. Not after what she'd seen. Not after what she knew now. Not after he had looked her in the eye and admitted he'd never truly seen her at all. The trees thinned as she reached the outer ridge. The snow was thicker here, untouched, feral, a blank sheet of winter that welcomed no footprints. Each step felt slower than the last, like the earth itself wanted to keep her from leaving. She pressed on until the ache in her spine flared again, like something waking up beneath her skin. She collapsed to her knees in the snow, panting. Her hand clutched her chest where the silver pendant rested, the one Serenik had given her during the first ceremony. Its glow had always been steady. Now it flickered. She stared down at it, heart racing. The symbol inside the moon-shaped stone had begun to twist. Not just a change in light, but in shape. In meaning. It wasn't her mark anymore. She staggered upright, dizzy with cold, with panic. Then she saw it. A shimmer in the snow ahead, just past a bend in the trees. Like heat haze on ice. She stepped toward it, eyes narrowing. Too late. Her boot touched the sigil. And the world fell inward. A pulse of darkness tore through the air, silent and absolute. Symbols erupted from the snow, spinning, silver-edged, ancient. The trap had waited for her like a mouth open beneath her feet. A dream sigil. No, but the word never made it past her lips. The ground vanished. When she woke, it was to silence and cold stone. She lay on a slab, not unlike the altar from her visions, but narrower. Sharper. Less ceremonial, more surgical. Chains bound her wrists and ankles, but not the kind she could rattle. These were woven of silver thread and etched with glowing script. They didn't just bind, they listened. Reacted. She tried to move, and they tightened. Her breath caught. The room around her was dim. A circular space of rough obsidian walls, all covered in mirrors, cracked, warped, half-shattered. They didn't reflect her. They showed other versions of her. One with darker eyes. One with longer hair. One smiling with blood on her lips. One naked, draped across a throne she'd never sat on. She jerked her head away, only to realize something colder hung at her throat. The moon pendant. Still there. But now completely black. The air shifted. A voice slid from the shadows like oil on glass. Finally awake. She turned her head, pulse spiking. Markion Vale stepped from behind one of the mirrors, elegant as ever. Not a speck of snow on his dark robes, not a strand of hair out of place. His gloves were silver-stitched, fingertips ringed with runes. He smiled. But it wasn't a kind smile. "Where am I?" Evelyn croaked. "This," he said, spreading his arms, "is the Echo Room. A lovely little chamber used during the War of Fractured Crowns. Designed to help spirits return to, well, whatever shell is convenient." He walked toward her, every step measured. "You're mistaken," she said. "I'm not a spirit. I'm not." "Oh, no. You misunderstand. You aren't the one returning." He brushed a thumb against her cheek, and she recoiled. "You're just what's left," he said softly. What do you want from me? I don't want anything, Evelyn. She does. He turned, gesturing toward the mirror to her right. It showed her again. But not quite. This version of her sat in a garden of bones, plucking petals from a blood rose. Her lips moved, chanting something Evelyn couldn't hear. I'm not her, Evelyn whispered. Perhaps, Markion said, but you write her sigils in your sleep. Did you know that? She stilled. He reached into his coat and pulled out a strip of parchment, no longer than a ribbon. On it were fresh symbols. Curved. Precise. Familiar. I found this clenched in your fist, he said. Your fingers were bleeding. She stared at the sigils. Her stomach twisted. I don't remember. Because it wasn't you, he replied gently. It was me, she snapped, eyes blazing. No, he said. It never was. He leaned down, so close she could feel the chill radiating from his skin. His voice dropped. Tell me, when did you stop recognizing your own reflection? When did the dreams become memories? When did the love you thought you were building begin to feel like a reenactment? Tears prickled behind her eyes. He straightened. The pendant on her chest flared once. And her fingers moved. Without permission. She looked down in horror as her right hand began to trace lines against the stone, careful, practiced lines. The beginning of a sigil. Not hers. Her breath hitched. No. Markion whispered. She's only borrowing. I didn't let her in. Oh, but you didn't stop her either, did you? I didn't know. You didn't want to. He circled her once, then reached out. The threads at her wrists pulled taut. And from the pendant at her throat, a thin filament of black light emerged, linking her chest to a symbol on the ceiling. A web. A gate. A funnel. The mirrors brightened. Each one showing Serenia now. Smiling. Standing. Waiting. I'm not her, Evelyn whispered again, barely audible. Markion crouched at her side. You're not you anymore either, dear. He stroked her hair back with gloved fingers. Then, softly. Or maybe, you never were. Chapter 19, The Face That Wasn't Mine. It began with a mirror. Not the kind set in glass and wood, but one made of memory, fractured, fluid, suspended in gray light that pulsed like breath. Evelyn stood in the center of the gray mirror world, barefoot on a floor that reflected no ceiling. Or perhaps it was the ceiling. Or the sky. Or nothing at all. Her reflection surrounded her. Thousands of her. All still. All smiling. She turned in place, dizzy with the weight of her own image. And then, one by one, the mirrors shifted. Her face blurred. Morphed. The brows arched. The lips deepened. The eyes, Evelyn's soft, tremulous gaze, became sharp and knowing. The woman in the mirror was still Evelyn. But not. She wore a crown of silver antlers. A black gown layered with opalescent scales. Her shoulders held tension like a general. Her eyes dared the world to kneel. And behind her, wolves. Dozens. No, hundreds. Formless shadows of fur and fang, eyes glowing, bodies pressed low to the ground in perfect, reverent submission. At the center of them, bound by nothing but will, knelt Serenik. Not just kneeling. Prostrate. His head bowed, lips at the edge of a silken shoe. Her shoe. Not Evelyn's. Hers. The woman's. Serenia. A voice rippled through the space like a tremor under skin. He was never yours. Evelyn stumbled back, hand to her chest. No, this isn't real. The mirrors flickered. Now she stood in the throne. Cloaked in silver black, her fingers draped lazily over the curve of the stone armrest. No. Her hands. But not hers. They moved without her will, fingers lifting in a command that sent the wolves crawling forward on their bellies, Serenik included. Stop it, she screamed. But the command had already been given. The wolves circled her throne in worship. Serenik raised his head. His eyes shone not with love, but with obedience. Don't, Evelyn whispered. But her lips moved again. Not her words. Kneel. Serenik dropped. Swear. His voice cracked. I am yours. Show me. He bowed his head to her foot, pressed his mouth to it. Evelyn's mind screamed. This wasn't her. This wasn't what she wanted. But the mirrors didn't care. And her body kept moving. She stood, no, Serenia stood, atop the throne, arms outstretched. The wolves howled as one, and the echo shattered the sky above. Pieces of gray glass rained down in silence. She stared at the shards around her feet. Each one caught her reflection. And each one showed Serenia's face. Not her own. Stop, Evelyn begged. I don't want this. Martian's voice cut across the void like a thread drawn tight. But she does. She spun. He stood at the edge of the platform, hands clasped behind his back, expression serene. She was always stronger than you, he said. Sharper. More deserving. I'm not her, Evelyn hissed. No, he agreed, stepping forward, but you're the best match we've ever found. The first who didn't burn under the bond. I didn't ask for this. Neither did she once. But she adapted. He lifted one hand. A mirror floated up from the shards at her feet and drifted between them. It shimmered. The image formed slowly, like a memory catching light. It showed Evelyn, lying on the ceremonial altar, bleeding from her back. Serenik's hand hovering over her spine. Her eyes fluttering. Her mouth forming a name. But the name wasn't hers. It was Serenia's. Another image, her body, writhing in fever. The mark shifting. Her hands tracing symbols she couldn't read. No, she whispered. Stop showing me. But the mirror didn't stop. It showed her laughing in the garden. But the laugh was deeper than hers. Controlled. It showed her kissing Serenik. But it was his eyes that were closed, his mouth whispering a name not spoken aloud. Serenia. Not Evelyn. Always Serenia. She fell to her knees. Her fingers dug into the ground. But the ground wasn't stone. It was water. And in the reflection below, she saw herself. But it wasn't Evelyn anymore. The hair was too perfect. The smile too confident. The tilt of the chin too precise. The crown of silver antlers gleamed against her dark hair. She reached up to touch her face. And the reflection moved first. She flinched back. I'm not her, she gasped. I'm not her, I'm not her. But the mirrors surrounding her now whispered in unison. You never were. You were only what she needed. A body to come home to. Get out. Evelyn screamed, slamming her hands into the glass floor. The ground rippled. But the reflection remained. Smiling. Serenia's voice echoed through the gray. Soft. Sure. This body finally fits. The mirrors cracked. The light went out. And Evelyn, what remained of her, sank into the dark with her screams still echoing around a face that was no longer hers. Chapter 20. The Marked for Erasure. She couldn't feel her hands anymore. Evelyn stood at the center of the mirror array, barefoot, the stone beneath her pulsing like a second heartbeat. 12 full-length mirrors encircled her, each glowing with runes that shimmered in hues of pale violet and silver blue. Their light was soft, almost gentle, like moonlight on a frozen lake. But she knew better. She couldn't move. Not because she was bound, but because her body no longer remembered how. Her reflection blinked back at her. 12 of them. But not one was hers. In one mirror, she was smiling, serene and distant. In another, she was draped in black fur and silver war plate, a queen without mercy. In a third, she knelt before an altar of wolves, a flame in each palm, her mouth open in soundless command. None of them were Evelyn. The center mirror began to ripple. A figure stepped into view. Yold. Draped in ceremonial red, her pale hair wound into a crown of thorns, she looked less like a witch and more like a priestess of ruin. She moved slowly, hands extended in welcome, voice low and unhurried. It's time. Evelyn tried to speak, tried to move. But her tongue was numb, her throat dry. I can see her now, Yold continued, circling the outer ring of mirrors, gaze never leaving her. Serenia is waking. Your body is holding beautifully. Evelyn's chest rose and fell faster. Not with breath, but panic. She looked down at her arms. Her skin shimmered, silver lace unfurling like vines beneath the surface, blooming in perfect synchrony with the runes on the floor. You've done well, Yold murmured. You've been exactly what she needed. A soft cage. A willing shape. Evelyn shook her head weakly. Her lips formed a word, no, but nothing came out. Yold's hand hovered just above the central rune. With a flick of her wrist, the mirror directly in front of Evelyn turned black. A voice echoed from within it. Low. Velvet smooth. Serenia's. Let me in. Evelyn's knees buckled. But she didn't fall. The floor held her up like a puppet on a string. Inside the mirror, Serenia's face emerged, still Evelyn's face, but sharper. Reforged. Claimed. The voice came again, this time from everywhere. You're tired. Let me take over now. Evelyn's heart pounded. Her hands curled into fists by instinct alone. The rune beneath her glowed brighter. She screamed. Or tried to. But the sound was silent. All that came was a desperate look, a cry through her eyes. And someone saw it. A flash. A blur. A silver streak carved through the mirror circle with bone-splitting precision. Yold's head whipped to the side. No, but Lucien was already there. Dressed in traveling leathers, snow still melting on his shoulders, his hair wild from the ride. He didn't pause. Didn't speak. Just lifted his right arm and plunged the silver bone blade straight into Evelyn's back. She convulsed. The rune shattered. A sound like glass and thunder tore through the temple. The mirror cracked from center to edge, spiderwebbing in unnatural silence. Evelyn collapsed. The sigil on her back burned black, split by the blade's arc. Blood spilled down her spine. Lucien caught her before she hit the ground. Sorry, he muttered, breathless. There wasn't time for a softer way. Yold screamed something behind him, casting a sigil with both hands, but Lucien was already moving. He hoisted Evelyn into his arms like she weighed nothing. The runes tried to react, tried to pull her back, but her mark was broken. The spell was collapsed. She was nearly ready, Yold hissed from behind, voice trembling. You've destroyed everything. Lucien turned his head, eyes colder than the grave. No, he said. I destroyed your toy. He turned and ran. The corridor blurred past them, mirrors and stone and scentless wind. Evelyn's head lolled against his chest, but her eyes, barely open, met his for 1 second. And she saw it. Panic. Not for himself. For her. Why? She rasped. Lucien didn't slow. Because someone in this cursed house should have protected you. They burst through the outer wall of the temple as explosions of energy shattered the doors behind them. Snow rushed to meet them, and the cold was like knives to Evelyn's skin. But it was real. It was hers. Lucien dropped low, vanished into the tree line, the sounds of pursuit rising behind them. You were never meant to be a weapon, he whispered as he pressed her tighter. And Serenic, his voice faltered, bitter, he never loved you. Not you. She closed her eyes. Her body ached in places she couldn't name. But something inside her, a name, a thread, had realigned. She was no longer Serenia's. Not Serenic's. Not Yold's. Not even Martian's broken dream. Lucien moved with terrifying speed through the trees, one hand pressed to the wound on her back to slow the bleeding. The sky cracked with wolves' howls. They were being followed. Still, Lucien didn't slow. Only whispered into the frost. You are Evelyn. Not anyone's shadow. Not anyone's dream. And for the first time, she believed him. Chapter 21. The Alpha Who Chose Wrong. The gates of Drellthorn groaned as they opened. No announcement. No guards. No banners raised in alarm. The ancient iron doors swung inward as if they'd been waiting for her all along. Evelyn stepped through them alone. Her cloak hung heavy with frost and dried blood, her breath ghosting in the dim winter air of the grand entrance hall. Her boots echoed against stone that once felt sacred, now hollow. The warmth inside the fortress felt wrong. Manufactured. Like it was pretending not to notice what had been done here. What had been taken. She walked forward. Past the outer columns. Past the shadows where statues used to scare her. Past the wolf-headed sigils carved in marble, now dulled by ash. Straight to the heart of the place she once thought might save her. The heavy double doors of the main hall were already open. He was waiting. Serenik stood at the base of the dais, breath ragged, hair mussed like he hadn't slept in days. He wore no armor. No crown. Just a tunic, half-buttoned, stained with ash, and was that blood on his sleeve? And when he saw her, he ran. Not with regal grace. Not with the weight of an alpha. But like a man unraveling. "Evelyn," he whispered. And then he was there. Pulling her into his arms, pressing her to his chest, his hands trembling with the force of his grip. "You came back. You came back to me." She didn't move. His mouth found hers, desperate, unguarded, searching. His kiss was not gentle, but consuming, like a man dying of thirst tasting water and wine and blood all at once. "I thought I lost you," he murmured against her lips. "I thought you were gone. But you're here. You're here, and it's you. It's you." She pushed him away. He blinked, stunned, as if the contact had broken some spell he'd cast over himself. Her voice, when it came, was not sharp. It was soft. And final. "No, Serenik," she said. "It was never me." He shook his head. "No, I know I confused things. I know I was blind. But I see you now. I know it's you. I know." "You don't," she interrupted. "You never saw me." He reached for her again, but this time she stepped back. "You saw a ghost wearing my face," she said. "You kissed me hoping I would answer with her mouth. You bound me with vows meant for someone else." Tears welled in his eyes. "Evelyn, You don't love me," she said. "You just couldn't forgive yourself for killing her." He froze. The silence after her words fell like a sword. "You didn't save me," she continued. "You used me. You let me bleed and bend and beg, just so you wouldn't have to grieve alone." "That's not true." She didn't let him finish. "I'm not her," she said slowly, deliberately. "And I never was." He sank to his knees. Just like he had in the dream. Only this time, she was awake. And it wasn't love he knelt in. It was loss. She turned to go. He reached out, catching the edge of her cloak. His hand closed over the fabric, but she didn't look back. "I would have loved you," he whispered. She paused at the threshold. "I know," she said. And then she left. No guard stopped her. No wolves howled. No wind cried in her place. Later, they said they found him still kneeling when the moon rose to its highest point. Alone in the throne room. Unmoving. His hands bloodied. His mouth parted in a whisper not meant for ears. "You're not her." His voice cracked, barely audible. "But I don't know the difference anymore." Chapter 22, The Queen They'd Tried to Wake. The heart of the Silverbone fortress pulsed like a living thing. Deep beneath the stone towers and spectral spires, beneath the moonstruck banners and rooms of blood-drenched rituals, the fortress hummed with a low, rhythmic throb. Not of drums. Not of magic. But of breath. Of waiting. Of things not quite dead. Yold Virea moved through the vaulted corridor with quiet purpose. Her crimson robes flowed behind her, embroidered with the sigils of the old blood houses, the forbidden ones, the ones who had once served under Serenia before the collapse of the Dream Throne. Her steps did not echo. The air around her bent in obedience. She carried a small vessel in both hands, carved of black bone and sealed with mirror glass. Inside it shimmered not light, but a slow, swirling shadow. A fragment. A remnant. A soul's sharpest shard. Serenia. She entered the Chamber of Reclamation, where Markion Vale stood waiting, back straight, gloves pristine, every inch of him carved from patience and poison. He watched her approach with the serenity of a man who had already seen the end and found it beautiful. "You're late," he said mildly. Yold held up the vessel. "She's finally stable." Martian's pale eyes flicked toward the object with reverence. "You've done well." She smiled faintly. "I always do." Around them, the room buzzed, not with noise, but with presence. Dozens of figures stood in silence. Not wolves. Not humans. Something in between. Their skin bore the etching of sigils, moon-bound glyphs burned directly into muscle and bone. They didn't blink. Didn't breathe like mortals. They stood in formation, heads bowed, linked by something deeper than voice. The spirit-bound legion. Failed mates. Broken vessels. Those who had once tried to hold the mark and had shattered under the pressure. Their minds had cracked, but their bodies lived. Animated by fragments of other souls, driven by echo commands. And now, they were waiting. Waiting for a queen. Waiting for a command. Markion raised his hands. They lifted their heads in unison. "Tonight," he said, his voice carrying not through the air, but into their thoughts, "we restore the world that was meant to be." The sigils on their bodies glowed. "Serenia will rise with the eclipse. And with her, we shall erase the rot that the impure have planted." Yold stepped forward. "The rebellion born of sentiment will be buried. No more will feelings dictate bonds. No more will love be mistaken for fate." She placed the vessel in the altar's socket. The room shuddered. From within the black bone, the shadow began to move faster, curling against the glass like a serpent sensing warmth. Markion closed his eyes. All around them, the mirror walls lit with visions, her face appearing in all of them. Serenia in battle. Serenia in seduction. Serenia in command. Serenia, whispering orders that armies obeyed without question. "The impure must be culled," Markion said. "Only those who carry the perfect contract shall remain." He turned toward a smaller mirror. One bound in chains. One sealed in bone. Inside it, a man sat on his knees. Naked. Breathing. But not conscious. Serenic Drellthorn. His hair hung across his face. His lips moved silently. The mark on his chest, the burned-out ruin of an old bond, glowed faintly with flickering light. Markion touched the mirror surface. Yold's voice was soft behind him. "He's still resisting." Markion didn't look away. Not for long. He pressed 2 fingers to the glass and whispered a word. "Kale." Serenic flinched. In the mirror, his body jerked. Not like a man waking. Like a beast tasting blood. "I had to bury him," Markion said conversationally, "when she died. His wolf. His instinct. He wouldn't let it out, not unless it was for her. Not unless it was under her command." Yold watched carefully. "And now?" Markion smiled. "He has nothing left to anchor him." Inside the mirror, Serenic's hands began to twitch. Then curl into claws. The skin along his arms rippled. His breath grew ragged. The mark on his chest twisted. "Wake him slowly," Yold warned. "Kale is not a tame thing. He'll devour what remains of the man." "That's the point," Markion murmured. Serenic's head lifted. His eyes snapped open. But they were not Serenic's. Gold. Too gold. No softness. No grief. Only fire. Martian's voice dropped to a whisper. "Kale," he said, "I have a command for you." Serenic's lips moved, low and guttural. "Who speaks?" "Your queen's hand." "Where is she?" "Coming," Markion said. "But first, you must prepare the field. There are those who failed to receive the mark. They must be erased." Kale didn't blink. "What are the limits?" he asked. "There are none." Kale smiled. A cruel, joyless curl of Fong. "I obey." The mirror pulsed. Chains fell away. Serenic, no, Kale rose slowly, dragging his armor from the shadows. Dark steel, old as war itself, once forbidden by the Northern Pact. Piece by piece, he began to fasten it onto himself. Chestplate. Gauntlets. Shoulder guards etched in runes older than the Drellthorn name. Markion watched in satisfaction. Serenia isn't here, he whispered. But your wolf is. Inside the mirror, Kale met his gaze. I was never gone, he said. The mirror cracked down the center. Chapter 23, The Army with No Soul. The wind howled through Wolfshade Pass like it was mourning the dead. Evelyn stood frozen at the ridge, the snow up to her calves and stained a copper brown that could no longer be called red. Below her, the mountain town that had once been little more than a cluster of inns and watchtowers now burned silently, no screams, no struggle left. Only smoke. And movement. Shadows that didn't shiver in cold. Beasts that walked like men but moved like machines. Lucien dragged her back behind a fallen pine, pressing her down with a sharp gesture to stay low. They're still sweeping, he said, voice barely audible over the wind. If we move now, we won't make it 10 feet. She nodded, trying to breathe past the scent, blood, burned wood, and something wrong. Like iron soaked too long in fever. The scent of broken bonds. She peeked around the trunk again. There were at least 20 of them still active, pacing the ruins of the village in wide, coordinated arcs. Each one was massive, bare-chested in the snow, their skin slick with frost and sweat, their eyes clouded over with a dull silver sheen. Their chests bore glowing sigils. The mate mark. But wrong. Not hers. Not Serenix. These weren't lovers blessed by the moon. They were tools. And they moved like it. 2 of them tore a door off a stone house, pulling a survivor out by the ankle. The woman screamed, but it was short. One of the beasts slammed her head into the wall like a butcher cracking bone. Evelyn's stomach turned. Lucien didn't look away. They're all marked, she whispered. Every one of them. He nodded grimly. The corrupted mark. Forced bonds. Probably drawn directly by Markion. She swallowed. I thought. Mate marks were sacred. Lucien's jaw tightened. So did I. They crouched in silence as a patrol passed within 10 feet, its breath fogging the air. The beast's eyes swept the ridge, but it didn't see them. It wasn't looking. Not with awareness. Not with instinct. Only program. Help me, Evelyn murmured suddenly, gripping the hilt of the silver bone blade Lucien had given her days ago. What are you doing? Getting answers. She moved before he could stop her, sliding down the ridge and landing in a crouch behind the corpse of a broken cart. The nearest beast turned at the sound. It charged. No roar. No warning. Just blind obedience to a command she couldn't hear. She stepped out from behind the cart and met it head-on. Evelyn. Lucien shouted behind her. She ignored him. The beast lunged. She didn't dodge. Instead, she drove the silver bone blade directly into its chest, just beneath the glowing brand. The moment the blade struck the mark, the sigil fractured. A howl ripped from the beast, not in rage, but in pain. Real pain. Its eyes cleared for half a second. Human. Alive. Aware. It collapsed to its knees, clutching its chest. And sobbed. Make it stop, the man inside whimpered. Please, make it stop. Then he crumpled to the ground, still trembling. The mark burned out, leaving nothing but scarred skin. Evelyn stood over him, breathing hard. Lucien reached her side, eyes wide. You broke the bond. No, she said softly. I freed him. They didn't speak for a moment. Another patrol turned the corner. Evelyn ducked behind Lucien, and they pulled back into cover as it passed. When it was gone, Lucien looked at her, his face pale. That mark, it's not love. It's not connection. It's control. Evelyn nodded slowly. I used to think being marked meant being chosen. Thought it meant something sacred. But if you can brand someone into obedience, into forgetting who they are... She looked down at the blade in her hand. Then it's not a gift. It's a curse. Lucien's voice was low, rough. And how many of them are like this? All of them, she whispered. He made an army out of failed lovers. Lucien swore under his breath, running a hand through his hair. How many do you think recognize him? Evelyn's stomach twisted. She didn't answer. They moved again, this time staying closer to the treeline, avoiding the burning wreckage of homes. Every so often, they'd hear the dragging of claws or the slam of bodies against stone. But the screams were mostly over. Until one beast staggered out from a crumbled church. It was smaller, faster, less corrupted. Its eyes locked on them instantly. "Run," Lucien said. They turned. But the beast was quicker. It lunged, slamming Lucien into a tree, knocking the wind out of him. Evelyn rolled, coming up with the blade in both hands. The creature turned on her, snarling. Then paused. It looked at her. Really looked. And whispered, "Evelyn." Her hand froze. "You remember me?" she breathed. It shuddered, clutching its head. "They said we'd forget," it rasped. "They said it wouldn't hurt. But I remember." Its hands shook. "I remember the feast. I remember the moonlight. I remember." It reached out a clawed hand. Lucien rose behind it, blade drawn. "No," Evelyn shouted. But it was too late. Lucien drove the dagger through its side. It gasped and slumped. Evelyn dropped to her knees beside it. Its lips moved once more. And the name it whispered wasn't hers. But, "Serenik, forgive me." Evelyn went still. Lucien looked at her. She raised her head slowly. Face bloodless. Voice hollow. "They know him," she whispered. Lucien said nothing. "They know him," she said again. "They fought for him. They followed him. And now, they were his victims. His weapons. His ghosts. The ones who didn't survive the bond." Chapter 24. The Alpha Who Forgot His Name. Moonfire Plateau was bathed in light that did not belong to the moon. The flames came from the ruins of what had once been the high outpost of the ancient Clawborn tribes. Silver towers reduced to blackened bones. Smoke curled like snakes through the mountain air, and the snow no longer looked white. It was painted in shades of copper and ash. Evelyn stepped through the ruins slowly. There was no wind. No birds. No voices. Only the crackle of fire and the wet sound of something large and heavy breathing just beyond the arch of broken stone. She heard him before she saw him. Not with words. With presence. Like a shadow remembering how to bleed. Serenik stood on the edge of the collapsed altar at the center of the plateau. He was shirtless, his back marked with old scars and new runes, half buried beneath armor straps and torn ceremonial cloth. His hair was matted with sweat and blood, falling over eyes that no longer glowed with fire, but with nothing at all. No pain. No reason. No name. Surrounding him were the remnants of the corrupted army, wolf-marked brutes with clawed fingers and jagged breath, waiting in eerie silence as if leashed to a will that no longer spoke aloud. Each of them bore a fractured sigil. None of them blinked. And in the middle of them all he stood. Kale. The part of Serenik that had no guilt. No mourning. No hesitation. Evelyn stepped forward, slow and deliberate. The frost cracked beneath her boots. He turned. For one suspended second, she saw his face, not as it was now, wild and wrong, but as it had once been in the quiet dark of a castle bed. The mouth that had kissed her like she mattered. The eyes that had never quite met hers, and now she knew why. But that moment vanished like breath in cold air. He moved. Fast. Predatory. He was on her before she could draw the blade. His weight slammed her into the scorched stone, claws pressed to her collarbone, breath seething from his mouth with the heat of a furnace. She didn't scream. She didn't flinch. His eyes weren't gold now. They were silver-glazed and feral. Not the eyes of a lover. Not even a man. "I warned them," he growled, voice ragged. "I told them to stop sending copies. I told them she was dead." His claws dug into her shoulders. She bled. He didn't blink. "I told them," he whispered, lowering his mouth to her ear, "I'd tear the next one apart." "I'm not her," Evelyn whispered. His grip tightened. "Liar." "I'm not Serenia," she said louder, trembling, but not from fear. And I won't pretend to be. He snarled, dragging her up by the front of her cloak and slamming her into the base of a ruined pillar. You wear her face, he said. You smell like her. Because they made me that way. He didn't respond. She reached slowly into her cloak, pulled out the silver bone dagger, and held it out, not toward him, but toward herself. Then she placed the blade in her own palm. He stared. She didn't flinch as the tip kissed her skin. You want her, she said softly. Then kill me. Her voice didn't waver. I'm not her. And I won't be her. Not for you. Not for anyone. His eyes widened. I'd rather die than spend another second being a shadow for your grief. The blade pressed deeper. Blood welled around her fingers. She closed her eyes. Waited. And in that breathless second of silence, she heard it. The first sound of doubt. He didn't move. Didn't strike. Didn't speak. But she felt it, the tremble in his arm. The hesitation in his breath. Then, the weight pulled back. She opened her eyes. Serenik had taken a step away. Just one. But enough. His hands were shaking. Not from rage. From fear. No, he murmured, voice breaking. No, that's not. He pressed a hand to his chest, as if something inside were cracking open. I didn't mean. She stepped toward him. He stumbled back. The wolves around them did not move. Frozen in the stillness of a command that hadn't come. I wanted to forget, he whispered, voice hoarse. She was in every dream. Every breath. I couldn't. I didn't know how to let her go. She said nothing. I told myself you were her. I told myself it was mercy. He met her gaze for the first time, not as Kale. Not as the wolf. But as the man. And he was weeping. I thought if I loved you enough, she would stop haunting me. Evelyn lowered the dagger. But I never stopped seeing her, he said. Even when you begged me to see you. She swallowed hard. He felt his knees. I don't remember who I am without her. I do, she whispered. He looked up. And in his eyes, she saw it. Serenik. Not Kale. Not the Alpha. Not the legend of the North. Just the broken man who had tried to replace a ghost with something living and failed. I'm Evelyn, she said. I'm not a shadow. Not a spell. Not your salvation. His hand reached out slowly. Not to grab her. To hold her. Like he didn't believe she would take it. She knelt. Placed her fingers over his. And said, if you want me to stay, you say my name. He choked. Say it, she whispered. His lips parted. He tried once. Twice. And then. Evelyn. Her name on his breath like something sacred. Don't die, he whispered. Not for her. She closed her eyes. And for the first time, it felt like someone saw her. Chapter 25. The wolves turn inward. The battlefield had no sky anymore. Only smoke. Only blood. Only the sound of wolves devouring wolves beneath a pale, rotten moon. From her perch above the valley, hidden in the jagged cliffs of Frostjaw's rim, Evelyn watched it unfold with hands clenched and heart silent. Below her, the wolf-shade battlefield writhed. Not with life, but with death wearing the skin of those who once swore to protect it. They had turned inward, just as Markion planned. The corrupted mate-marked soldiers, those once human, once hopeful souls, were no longer a legion. They were a plague. The sigil fusion engine had activated. She'd seen it, felt it, when it happened. A pulse like a heartbeat across the land, invisible but not unfelt. It had hit the wool-born first. Then the half-bound. Then even the tethered ones. Now the battlefield was chaos. Beasts clawed each other, bleeding silver where blood should be red. Runes flared and cracked on their skin, shattering like bone under pressure. They tore at enemies and friends alike, driven not by hate or command, but by the echo of pain. The mark meant to bind soul to soul had become a weapon of emotional contagion. And the emotions it spread now were only agony and frenzy. Lucien crouched beside her on the ledge, pale and still, watching as another cluster of beast-bound shredded through a civilian line trying to flee. He didn't speak. Hadn't for 10 minutes. They both knew nothing they said would stop it. Only one person might have. And he was down there. Serenik. Through the fire and the ruin, she could see him. The warlord's crest on his back burned faintly beneath claw-torn armor. His sword was gone, his claws bared, his posture low, not hunting, not commanding, but surviving. Holding. Barely. Around him, a thin line of wolves still obeyed. Not many. Half collapsed, bloodied, torn. He barked orders. Some responded. Others convulsed and turned on each other before his eyes. He tried to stop them. He tried again. And again. But each time he reached out, another bond snapped. Another sigil exploded. Another beast, his beast, lost control and vanished into the madness. Kale was rising. She could feel it from here. Serenik's spine twisted mid-fight, his head snapping back like something was trying to claw its way out of his throat. He fell to one knee, slammed his fist into the earth, and stayed there, shuddering. Lucien exhaled. It wasn't a sigh. It was grief. He's not going to make it, Lucien said, voice raw. Even if he lives through this, he won't be Serenik when it ends. Evelyn didn't answer. She couldn't. Because something inside her, a thread, a wound, a name, still reached for him. Even now. Even after the lies. The branding. The manipulation. The ghost of Serenia whispering from every kiss. But she didn't move. Not this time. She watched instead. Watched as Serenik staggered to his feet, face half-shadowed in blood, chest heaving. Watched him try to form a formation again, call his warriors to heal. But they didn't hear him. Not anymore. The wolves no longer knew his voice. They only knew the scream inside his mind. Kale. The wild thing. The desperate, furious beast who had given up on language and law and family. Kale who tore through the last line of control and dragged Serenik with him into the void. A scream erupted from below, not from him. From the wolves. All of them. It wasn't war anymore. It was mourning. And they didn't know what for. Lucien rose beside her. We have to go, he said quietly. Before the echoes spread further. But she didn't move. He looked at her, eyes tired, but not without compassion. I know he broke you, he said. She flinched. Lucien didn't press. But I also know this, he continued. He didn't want to let go. Of her. Of himself. Of the war. Of you. He looked down the slope again, where Serenik had dropped to one knee, surrounded by wolves both feral and dying. I don't think he ever truly loved you the right way, Lucien said. But I think, against everything that poisoned him, he tried. That made it worse. Evelyn closed her eyes. She remembered the way he said her name. Just once. At the edge of death, voice shaking. Evelyn. But once wasn't enough. Not anymore. Below them, Serenik fell to the ground entirely, chest heaving, claws buried in the dirt like he was trying to hold onto the world by force alone. The wolves didn't notice. They were too busy tearing each other apart. Lucien stepped back, ready to leave. He waited. When she still didn't move, he turned, eyes softer now. Not demanding. Just real. He's drowning, he said. Then softer. He's nearly gone. Evelyn opened her eyes. The wind howled through the canyon. She could still taste the name on her lips. But she said nothing. Because love didn't mean forgiveness. And seeing someone's ruin didn't mean you had to help rebuild it. Even if part of you still wanted to. Lucien took a step forward. And then, almost too quiet to hear, he spoke again. He's slipping, Evelyn. A pause. You really won't go back for him? Chapter 26, The Gray-Bound Vow. The ridge bled beneath the moon. Blood Moon Ridge had earned its name 1,000 times in the past, but never like this. From her vantage high on the southern slope, Evelyn saw the valley carved in shadow and flame. The snow had melted into slush the color of dying roses, streaked with smoke and flesh. The wind carried howls, some bestial, others terrifyingly human. And at the center of it all, surrounded by bodies both loyal and traitorous, stood the monster who had once worn the shape of a man she loved. Cyrenik. Or what was left of him. Kale now moved in his body like a storm with bones. He ripped through the beast-marked traitors with reckless, suicidal precision. Claw met throat. Tooth met spine. His form shifted mid-motion, sometimes wolf, sometimes man, always more than both. Blood soaked his arms, his chest, his face. The wolves that had once fought under his banner turned on him, maddened by the same chaos that had shattered the battlefield at Wolfshade. And he met them all with the fury of something that had nothing left to lose. Evelyn didn't move. Not even when his scream echoed up the ridge. Not even when his claws cracked against the stone altar below, leaving a trail of red across the ancient sigil carved into the mountain. Lucien stood a few paces behind her, breathing heavy from the climb. He didn't speak at first. He didn't need to. She could feel his stare against the side of her face like another weight. The wind shifted, carrying the sound of snapping bone. And beneath it, a name. Screamed. Shattered. Serenia. Evelyn didn't flinch. Lucien stepped forward, voice low. He's dying. I know. He's alone. Yes. Lucien swallowed. You could stop this. I could, she said, soft and even. But I won't. His jaw clenched. You're not like them, Evelyn. She turned toward him slowly, her face like ice. I'm not like her either. He faltered. She looked back down at the carnage. At the figure still standing, barely, at the center of the broken stone ring where wolves once swore blood oaths to a queen long dead. Cyrenik, or Kale, staggered now, shoulders trembling, breath coming in shudders. His arms hung limp, and one leg dragged behind him, torn open to the bone. Still, he turned. Still, he fought. Even when there was no one left to kill. Even when the enemy was only silence. She remembered the first time he kissed her. The first time he whispered her name. The first time he said, "You're the one I chose." And how every word had never been meant for her. Below, Kale felt his knees. He tilted his head to the sky. And howled. It wasn't rage. Or even sorrow. It was longing. The kind that scraped marrow and shattered men from the inside out. Serenia, he roared again, voice cracking. I did it, I kept them away, I did it. Evelyn's throat tightened. But she didn't move. Lucien stepped closer. He's looking for her. I know. He thinks she'll come. She won't. He looked at her. And in his voice, finally, there was no judgment. Only quiet awe. You're really not going down there. She turned to face him fully. And smiled. No. Her eyes were dry. Her hands steady. I'm not his Serenia. And I will not become his last delusion. Below, Cyrenik dropped to all fours. His claws scratched at the altar stone as if trying to carve a new oath into a place too ancient for forgiveness. Please. His voice was hoarse now, barely human. Just once more. He reached out. Toward the moonlight falling across the ground. His fingers closed on nothing. And trembled. He collapsed forward, chest rising and falling in ragged bursts, blood pooling beneath him like an ink blot against the snow. The wind picked up again. And Evelyn turned. Lucien didn't follow. She walked away from the ledge, her footsteps leaving no trail in the hard, packed ice. At the ridge's crest, she paused once more. Not to look back, but to breathe. To feel the weight of nothingness settle over her shoulders like a long-awaited cloak. Behind her, a gasp echoed faintly. But it was not her name he called. Not anymore. She whispered to the cold, I'm not his anymore. And kept walking. Chapter 27, The Last Burned Name. Asphalt was not silent. It breathed. Through the cracks in the scorched earth, steam hissed upward like dying whispers. The stones glowed faintly with the memory of fire, and beneath the molten veins that pulsed in the rock's belly, something ancient groaned, like the mountain was still remembering its last eruption. Lucien stepped carefully. Every footfall crunched on cinders. Every breath tasted of smoke and regret. He cradled the object in both hands, the edges of it still warm, too warm for something dead. A scroll wrapped in charred ribbon, sealed with dried blood. It throbbed faintly, like a heart, like a warning. Behind him, the ridge where Serenic had stood hours ago was little more than glass stone now. The spot where he'd made his last stand, his last breath, his last vow, obliterated. Not by claws, not by war, by choice, by the forbidden right whispered in Drellthorn bloodlines. Bloodbone binding. The sealing of soul, memory, and power into a final act of will. The ultimate silence. Lucien had only seen it once before, as a child, and he'd never thought his brother would use it. He approached the edge of the ridge where Evelyn waited. She did not turn to look at him. Her cloak flared gently in the heat wind. Her hair was streaked with ash. Her back was straight, her hands folded before her. Lucien extended the scroll. She didn't move. "It's not a letter," he said softly. "Not quite. More like a dream pressed into memory. A oniric testament. His last one." Only then did she reach out. Her fingers brushed his. The scroll pulsed once, and then unfolded itself. Not with words, but with voice. A whisper bloomed in the air between them, swirling in motes of red dust and shimmering shadow. Serenic's voice. Low, rough, torn by grief and clarity alike. "If this dream finds you, then I am already ash." Evelyn's throat tightened. Lucien stepped back, leaving her with the ghost. "I bound my life to a name that was not yours. I let it define my grief, my guilt, my rage. I wore her memory like a crown and a curse. I thought I killed her because I hated her. But that was a lie." The red motes twisted into fragments of vision, a blurred image of Serenia, standing at the edge of the Drellthorn altar, eyes glowing, lips curved in a cruel smile. "I killed her because she stole something I didn't even know I still had. The capacity to love someone who wasn't her." Evelyn's breath caught. "I didn't kill Serenia to end a war. I killed her because she convinced me that no one would ever be enough. And then you came." More visions flickered, her face, laughing in the library, her hands pressed his chest in the moonlight, her sleeping figure curled beside him after the first ceremony. All moments he hadn't seemed to cherish. But he had. "You weren't her. You didn't try to be. And I hated you for it. Because I couldn't stop looking at you and thinking, what if you were?" Evelyn turned her face to the smoke. Her eyes were dry, but her heart pounded like it had been split open and stitched shut all at once. "I told myself loving you would mean betraying her. But the truth is I was afraid. Afraid to love someone real. Someone who saw me not as a king or a beast or a memory, but as a man. I wanted to tell you. I wanted to choose you." The motes turned dark, fractured, as if even the dream was falling apart. "But by the time I stopped mistaking your silence for surrender, you were already walking away. And I couldn't call after you." Evelyn stepped forward, slowly, as if approaching the edge of something more than a cliff. Lucien remained silent, hands folded at his chest, gaze lowered. "So I did the only thing I had left. I sealed the ghost away, and let the man finally die." The last of the motes burned brighter, brighter. A single line etched itself in the air, written in his hand, scarred and uneven, shaking. "I didn't fear that you weren't her. I feared that you were you." And with that, the dream sigil curled into flame. The scroll turned to ash. Gone. But not before one final shape glowed in the stone below their feet. 5 words carved by fire. Her name was Evelyn. Chapter 28, The Letter in the Ashes. The ruins of Silvergrave Chapel were quieter than any grave. Evelyn sat alone on the cracked stone bench beneath what remained of a stained glass window. The colors had long since bled away, leaving jagged shards still clinging to the arch like memories afraid to let go. Ash drifted gently through the broken dome. Not from fire, but from time. Everything here had once mattered to someone, to a people, to a faith, to the kind of vows whispered beneath the moon and sealed in blood and breath. Now all that remained was stone and silence. And the letter in her lap. No seal. No signature. Just a curl of parchment folded with an intimacy that made her chest ache before she even opened it. The scroll wasn't ordinary. It pulsed faintly. Not alive, but not inert. A dream-scribed artifact, tied to the one who wrote it with threads of memory rather than ink. Her hands shook as she peeled it open. The first line wasn't addressed to her. It wasn't addressed at all. She hums at night, just beneath her breath. A song I've never heard before. Soft. Raw. Not meant for anyone's ears. But I listen anyway. Evelyn's lips parted. She thinks I sleep through it. I don't. I remember. She turned the page with trembling fingers. The next note was shorter. She burns herself on the kettle each morning. Never says anything. But she flinches when she stirs the mug. She hands it to me with her left hand now. I never told her I noticed. But I did. I remember. The third. She laughs differently when she forgets I'm in the room. That laugh isn't Serenia's. It's not practiced. It's not wicked. It's hers. I remember. Each entry a moment. Each line an admission he never dared speak aloud. But had written. Over and over again. Small things. Inconsequential things. A flick of her wrist. The tilt of her head when she braided her hair in the greenhouse. The way she read books aloud softly when she thought no one was listening. He'd seen it all. And he'd known it wasn't Serenia. She doesn't say things to be remembered. She says them because she believes someone should. No one ever said them for her. I remember. Evelyn swallowed around the lump rising in her throat. There were no declarations of love. No apologies. Just pages and pages of memory. Of proof. That he had been there. Present. Watching. Choosing not to act. Not because he didn't know. But because he did. And it terrified him. She whispers when she sleeps. Not words. Just a sound. Like a breath trying not to shatter. I touch her back sometimes to calm her. But I never hold her. Because I know if I do, I won't let go. And I don't deserve to keep her. Not when I still dream of someone else. But it's not her voice that haunts me now. It's the silence of the one lying beside me. Evelyn's vision blurred. She pressed a shaking hand to her mouth, trying to trap the sob that threatened to break loose. There were more pages. So many more. She said, I'm not her. I should have said, I know. But I didn't. I looked away. I looked away because if I looked at her too long, I would have said, thank the gods you're not. I remember. The final page had only one line. No flourish. No poetry. No name. Just the truth. Scrawled with hands that had been bloody and too late for too long. I loved her too slowly to save her. The page burned at the edges. Not with fire, but with memory unraveling. A timed dream. Meant to die once read. Evelyn held it as long as she could. But it crumbled anyway, turning to soot in her lap. She sat in the silence after, ash on her fingers, tears on her cheeks, the ruins of faith around her. And whispered. More to the ghosts than herself. You knew. She shook her head. Voice cracking. You knew who I was. You knew all along. The wind answered with nothing. And still, she whispered. You just never had the courage to love me while I was still alive to feel it. Chapter 29. The name he whispered in his sleep. The snow fell like silence made visible. It drifted in slow spirals, touching Evelyn's bare shoulders with a softness that did not bite, did not chill. The cold here wasn't real. It didn't sting or numb, it simply was. A quiet kind of stillness that blanketed the world in calm. She walked barefoot across the frozen expanse, the sky above her a pale wash of moonlight and stars too steady to exist in any waking world. No wind. No echo. Only the crunch of her steps and the soft weight of dreams. She knew this wasn't real. but it felt real in the way only dreams did, half memory, half longing. Ahead, the snow opened into a wide clearing. A frozen lake stretched to the horizon, reflecting the moon in sharp, perfect detail. In its center stood a single figure, still as a shadow. A wolf. Black as midnight, dusted with silver frost. It watched her. Didn't move. Didn't breathe. Until she stepped forward. The moment her foot touched the ice, he moved. Slowly. Carefully. Deliberately. He padded across the lake toward her, eyes glowing with something not feral, but ancient. Wounded. Tired. She knelt without thinking, as if her body remembered something her mind did not. The wolf stopped before her. For a heartbeat. Then shifted. Not violently. Not in agony. Just quietly. Bone folded into skin. Muscle reformed, reshaped. And then he was there, Serenic, kneeling before her. Naked. Human. Raw. But this time, there was no blood. No war. No ghost in his eyes. He lowered himself until his head rested in her lap, hair spilling over her thighs like ink on parchment. Neither of them spoke. For a long while, they simply breathed in the stillness. Then, a whisper. Barely more than breath. I wasn't waiting for her. Evelyn stilled. His voice was different here. Softer. Lighter. Like the weight had finally fallen from his chest, and he could speak without choking on guilt. I thought I was, he continued, eyes closed, lips brushing the fabric of her dress. But it was never about her. She wanted to ask him what he meant. Wanted to say, then why did you make me carry her name? Her memory? But she said nothing. And he kept speaking. I think I was always waiting for someone who would let me forget. He turned his head just slightly, just enough that she could see the side of his face. His jaw. The faint curve of a scar. The softness in his lashes. His hand slid up, resting on her knee. I knew it wasn't her from the first moment you touched me, he whispered. Her hands were fire. He opened his eyes. Yours were trembling. She felt something crack. Something old. Something stubborn. And then, he said it. Her name. Clear as moonlight. Evelyn. The sound wrapped around her like a vow. Like a benediction. Like something that had been waiting lifetimes to be spoken aloud. Her throat clenched. She reached for him, fingers brushing his cheek. He leaned into the touch, just barely. And vanished. The dream shattered like ice beneath her palm. She woke with a gasp. The room was still dark. But outside the window, the moon was high. Silver light poured across her bed, painting the blankets in pale blues and gentle white. Her hands trembled in her lap. Her eyes were wet. And yet, she wasn't crying. Not truly. Because he had said it. Finally. Not in desperation. Not in confusion. Not in grief. He'd said it with clarity. With love. Evelyn. The sound of it still echoed inside her. She looked to the window. Whispered to the moon, you finally knew me. And the light somehow seemed to nod in return. Chapter 30. The moonlight doesn't lie. The fire moon flower bloomed late that year. Its petals curled in slow defiance of the frost, crimson edges lit by the silver sheen of the forest's breath. Evelyn crouched beside the stem, fingertips gently brushing frost from the leaves. It didn't matter that it bloomed only once. It didn't matter that it would wither before the next season. Some things were never meant to last. She stood, brushing dirt from her hands, and looked toward the clearing ahead. There, at the edge of the trees, sat a simple stone. No markings. No names. Just the silence of a vow never spoken aloud. She hadn't carved anything onto the headstone. Not his name. Not hers. Not theirs. Only the flower bloomed before it now, flickering red and gold like a quiet flame against the snow. That was enough. She walked back to the cabin slowly, her boots crunching lightly over the scattered leaves. The path was familiar now, soft and shadowed, lined with moss and roots that curled like old memories. The Silverbone forest no longer frightened her. Not with its ghosts. Not with its stories. She knew what it meant to live in a place that remembered. The cabin was small. One room, 2 windows, and a wooden table where she dried herbs and wrote songs no one else would hear. She kept a fire going most nights. Sometimes she read. Sometimes she walked under the trees until the stars blinked out of the sky. Sometimes she dreamed. But less often now. The dreams no longer clawed at her. They didn't pretend. And they didn't lie. She sat by the hearth, fingers curled around a steaming cup of mint tea, and glanced toward the window. The moon was rising. Full. Pale. Brighter than she remembered it ever being when she lived behind castle walls and beside the lips of men who only whispered the names they wanted her to wear. She touched her chest. No mark. No brand. No one's mate. Not anymore. A breeze slipped through the open window, carrying the scent of snow and pine, the hush of something deeper than silence. And then, a sound. Low. Drawn. A single wolf's howl drifting through the trees. It echoed through the forest like a memory too stubborn to die. She didn't cry. Not this time. She walked to the doorway, stepped out barefoot into the snow, and tilted her face to the light. The moon poured down on her like an old truth. She smiled. Not with sorrow, but with the soft finality of someone who had, at last, stopped apologizing for being real. "I'm not your ghost," she whispered to the trees. "I'm not your second chance." She looked toward the direction of the howl. "I'm not your Serenia." The woods didn't answer. Not with words. But the wind carried back something else. A voice. Soft as snow on skin. "You're not a substitute. You're the last thing I ever chose." She closed her eyes. The howl faded, but the words remained. She turned back into the cabin, closed the door gently behind her, and whispered into the dark. "You're gone. But I'm finally me."